Oh my God. Yeah. Okay, we're live. So everybody knows.
Sometimes
Alicia's next up. And then Ken.
So Pete and I actually did it, and Greg, and then
I'm Mrs. Marks.
it's different.
I'm Spell.
Than my wife said it's that we should like that. It's close. So
What's that?
Okay. Administration.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Brighton Area Schools Board of Education work session and special board meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. Ackerman, roll call, please.
Mr. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Trombley?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Here.
Dr. Krebs?
Here.
Mr. Myers?
Here. All right, that moves us to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Krebs, supported by Ms. Mitchell. Any discussion?
I'd like to add something to the agenda. Board reports, section 7, make it item D,
I'm sorry, 7, what?
and put it in section 7 and just make it item D. I'd like to put board reports in there, please.
With robotics room location?
Underneath
Oh, you
it.
said D. I
Yeah,
thought
make
you
it a
said
new,
B.
make it, please.
So we have a motion to amend the agenda to add board reports in the second.
Moved.
Supported by Mr. Trombley. Any further discussion?
Just a clarification, it's under the work session or under? It's
The work session.
That's good.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the amended agenda signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 5-0. Okay, that moves us to the call to the public. For those of you who aren't familiar with our process, there are cards at the rear of the room on the table. We ask you fill out a card, place it in the box there. If you would like to address the board, there's no cards. All right. Anyone would listen? Mr. Last chance, would like to address the board? The motorcycle driver? Okay, well, that will close the call to the public and move us right into the 4 action items. Item A, property tax L4029. Strangler.
This is the annual tax rate request that the board approves each year so we can levy our property taxes for operations and debts. So as presented at the last meeting, just looking for approval tonight. We'll get those to the local municipalities.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell, supported by Mr. Trombley. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 5-0. That takes us to item B, the 2022-2023 LESA budget. Mr. Engleter, is that you again?
Nope.
No, Mr.
So,
Dr.
yeah, I can share that. Provided the information at last meeting. It was from LESA, from Dr. Hubert. And they are asking you tonight to either support their budget or to not support their budget. So that's the action item that's been requested.
All right. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Krebs. The motion is to support, to approve the LESA budget. Do we have a second? Supported by Ms. Mitchell. Any discussion?
Yeah, if we don't support it, what's that mean? I don't think it means anything, right?
I believe that's true.
So, I mean, it's just like a rubber stamp, right? I mean, it means nothing really at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that, like in the spirit of collaboration, I think that LESA, because they're a lot of their budget does directly touch our district and obviously touch the 5 districts. They would like to get the feedback from you all. So that's the technical reason for it. So, okay, got it.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 5-0. All right, that takes us to item C, tech equipment purchase. Would that be Mr. Engleter?
This was presented at the last meeting. I don't remember. Yeah, Nick, this was the tech equipment.
Yeah, there's
purchase.
40, or 8 machines being purchased for May 26th, the high school, and then the newspaper room, and then 50 machines being purchased for the STEAM center, from Ed Jordan's.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Or,
Moved by Mr. Conley, supported by Mr. Trombley. Any discussion?
so when's the delivery date on this?
Roughly, I'll put it in tomorrow, probably 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
So will we have it, so this is for Jordan's classroom.
We'll be ready for fall, yeah.
So will we have it for the first day of class for them to be able to use?
Yeah, I'm wanting it about 2 weeks before school starts.
Will it be here for them to be able to use? Software loaded, everything
Desktops
ready to
are
go.
right now, it's laptops that are ready. So desktops come in relatively quickly. We've already got monitors, so the desktops come in relatively quickly, so I think we should be fine.
Why are we waiting till now to order it when we knew the equipment that was coming, how long ago?
I ordered his with the same turnover schedule as the rest of the lab teachers. So I didn't make a special order just because it was the STEAM center, so he just got ordered it with the rest of them.
So everything that's ordered will be here for next year's use.
Correct.
And if it's not, then it's not, I guess. People go without.
I mean, they can continue to use the equipment they already have. It's fine. Last number of years, they've had some.
Okay, so
I
what,
would recommend it, but
okay. All right. All right, I guess we'll see.
Anything further? All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 5-0. That moves us to item D, laptop purchases. Mr. Castile, or
How is that different?
It's 80 laptops.
that's the desktops, the rest of the desktops. So the 80 were the rest of the desktops. The first. So the 80 were the desktops I talked about that are going actually in high school. Yeah, so they're not laptops, they're desktops.
Were both of them desktops
Both,
then?
yes, both orders are, they're just two separate.
there's two
So,
separate.
so the 40 are for Matt Jordan's classroom and the 80 are for where?
They're for 8, I believe it's 8 Wing 6, and then, I thought you guys might paper.
And is it just the cycle?
Just, just trying to, just replace what they're.
Do we have, no, that's okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Krebs, supported by Mr. Conley. Any further discussion?
So what happens to the old equipment?
So we either recycle the old equipment if it's old enough, sometimes we'll sell them back to resellers, and sometimes we'll use them as parts. A lot of times we'll sell the same bottles, so they'll just be replacements for other bottles that are.
I thought in the past, didn't in the past, we also offered those to the staff in the district, or?
Those are the teacher laptops we offer to the staff to buy back.
Okay.
Sometimes we donate them to other districts as well. We donate them to if they have the need for them.
What's the reason with going with desktops versus?
In the classrooms, they just prefer to use the desktops in the classrooms instead of something more mobile. More checkout labs, stuff like that.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 5-0. That closes our, for action items tonight, moves us into our work session. The first item in our work session is the strategic plan. So Dr. Alwa, you want to launch that for us, please?
All right. So at our last meeting on May 9th, the Strategic Planning Committee presented the draft strategic plan to the Board of Education. And tonight is the opportunity for the board to ask questions. We have members of the committee here this evening, and Dr. Mosier, by the way, if you don't know, Liz has successfully defended her dissertation, is now Dr. Mosier. So congrats to Liz.
Congratulations.
Yeah, all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you there, but you know, we're here to answer questions. Before we do that, just a little reminder on kind of the philosophy as we went into this. This is a very student-centered document. This is not, there are things that we're going to do in this district that are not on this list. For example, you're not going to find things like we must take care of our finances, because that's a condition that we need to have no matter what our strategic plan is. We need to hire and retain the best teachers. We need to take care of our facilities. Those are things that are just things that we need to do. This strategic plan is very focused on the student experience in the Brighton area schools. And we focused in on 5 big areas here. The first one being curriculum, what it is that students are supposed to be learning. 2 is instruction. How are students learning that? 3, assessment. How do we know that students are learning? 4, what do we do when students aren't learning? That's intervention. And then 5, what is the optimal culture in our school district for student learning and for student growth? We had a 47-person team. We also had surveys of a number of other folks. We looked at data. I'm really proud of the work that the team did. We had some great brains at the table. It included staff members, it included parents, it included students. And I can tell you that the voice of all the different groups were part of developing this plan. This is a 5-year plan. This is not something that will be completed in 1 year. These are attainable goals, but they're not goals that we just check a box. These are stretch goals. These are the ones that stretch us to the next level as a district. And a lot of the implementation details on these, that's the next phase of this. So for example, if we were to approve this document, our next phase would be figuring out the specific programming that would help us to deliver on the varying goals that we have in this plan. So with this in mind, I know that you've had a chance to look this over and review it. We're open for questions. What kind of questions do you have about our strategic plan draft?
Do you think this plan is different than if COVID didn't happen? Was that taken into consideration at all? Or?
Yeah, I think that the part that's about wellness, we made that a big point. I think that it would have been a really good goal before COVID-19 for us to have that overall wellness, but I think it's become more in the spotlight. And then in the culture side of it, we also have some goals in there that I think we're emphasizing even more because of COVID. Some of the things like relationships and connections between peoples, those were things that probably would have been in the plan anyway, but those are very high priorities as students are transitioning back to normal. So it's a great question.
So my biggest concern without anything like this that gets rolled out is follow-up and who's going to follow up and how is that going to be followed up. So in other words, you put a plan like this in place, what are going to be the measures to make sure it's working?
Well, that's a great question. And that's where we started.
That's why I ask it.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it is a great
Okay.
question because it's the first question we started with. And if you looked, the first thing that we had in this plan, these are the pathways to us to achieve the goal. But the first thing that the board was involved with, I believe it was in February of this year, was to identify the measurable targets that we would achieve as part of this.
I remember
We
that.
set goals for achievement, we set goals for post-secondary attainment, and we set goals for the environment that students are in order to do this. So there are measurable things that we'd be able to report back. As a committee, what we've talked about doing is having touch bases as a committee where we would meet. We had talked about meeting, I believe we talked about fall, mid-year, and end of year, where we would look at our goals, what progress are we making, do anything need to be adjusted, what's the implementation on that? And then the plan was that we had talked about is we'd also like to be able to report back to the Board of Education on our progress. In my previous district, I did this same type of measure where you have the measurable goals. And I did an annual report for the Board of Education so that you were able to see the progress that we're making. So for example, we've set a goal of 66% of our students meeting the standards in college readiness. Okay. And, right now we were at 49%. Last year, we were about a little over 50 right now. So next year we'll be able to report and, we need to continue to make that progress, but it's a 5-year goal. So that's how we do it, by getting back together, reviewing our progress as a committee, but also involving the Board of Education, reporting out on progress that we've made.
So is it the team as a whole that does this, or are there certain individuals as part of the team, or who ultimately makes those decisions, I guess? And let me get even more minute. So tell me how at the high school, someone's going to be able to go to a class and based on the strategic plan, let us as the board know that, yeah, this particular class and this particular teacher is following this strategic plan.
So the big part of it here, the committee is going to be part of looking at the overall goals. So that's the 47-person committee. Obviously, people can leave the committee if they're up, or they can stay together. So that's the big picture. But as far as implementation of the plan, it is administration, working with teachers. There's accountability. A lot of this is done through our professional development, our professional learning series that is done by Liz. This is how we implement things.
So is it going to be different than what you do now?
So the thing that's missing right now is that we don't have clear expectations like a strategic plan. So I'll give you an example. Why is a strategic plan so important? It goes back to what you're talking about here. We have made it very clear what we're doing as a school district. And when the Board of Education approves this plan, this is where we're going. It's not a debate. So let me give you an example of one. I'm just going to go to one that's easier.
Sure.
I'll go on the culture side of it,
Fine.
right? So we have a goal here that every student in our school district has one positive, meaningful peer relationship, right? That is not debatable. That's not debatable. That is a goal that we're going to have system-wide. So we're going to work together, teaching staff, us, parents. We're going to work together. Students are part of that process. We have to develop the programs. We have to develop a way for students to be able to give us feedback so that we're able to make adjustments. We're doing it because this is one of our goals that we have set as a school district. So that's why a strategic plan is so important, because there's clarity of what is expected.
Okay, so let's not lose that thought then. So when you're speaking of that, just as you said, who's going to follow up and make sure that that particular kid has that peer? And what if that kid doesn't have the peer? Then what happens?
Yeah, so one of the pieces on that peer piece is a way for us to gather that feedback from students. We've had some creative ideas from members of the committee, but we have to have a way to be able to gauge it from the student side. And we have some good ideas. We have some that deal with technology. We have others that have to do with survey information from students. Some of it has to do with, there's going to have to be some outreach, like if we identify students. One of the areas that we've identified as a concern is lunchtime. When we see a student that's sitting alone at lunchtime, that's incumbent upon us to check in with that student and, meet that student and find out what is the program that we're going to do to connect people at lunchtime. So again, it's all of us together that are working on that piece. Part of it is a systematic way for us to track that data. So a lot of the things that are in this are systems. What I mean by that is sometimes in school districts, you'll do great things that are very dependent on one person. And that one person leaves or moves or something happens, the program goes away. So what we're looking at in this strategic plan and almost all of these goals is, I call it the ground game, but this is system-based, where whether I'm here or somebody else is here, we have a different curriculum director, we have different people on the board, we have consistency of process. When it comes to reviewing curriculum, when it comes to implementing, our assessment calendar, that we have systems in place that live on beyond individuals. So when we talk about the relationship side, what are the systems that we put in place that have automatic checks and balances to it that we're able to review. As a committee, we'll review multiple times a year that data on all these different goals. So there's kind of a collective ownership of these goals. And again, it starts from the board saying, yes, this is where we're going. And then the follow-up is something that you do year after year. And again, I've been doing this for a little while here. And in my last 2 strategic plans that I've led, we've met multiple times every year. Those review meetings are powerful because you'll go in there and you'll say, wow, we really need to work in on, goal 2B. Let's really focus on that. Looking at the data, what are we going to do? Some of these goals will come back and we'll say, we'd like to tweak these goals. And if you keep this as a dynamic document, it can be really valuable to all of us in the work that we're going to do.
So what are you asking us tonight to say, yeah, this is the direction that we want to go in?
So, so tonight, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, to get a feel for the goals that we've set, to ask for clarification. And then when the board feels comfortable with this document, the board to take a vote and say, this is our strategic plan that we're going to start with, and here we go. So, yeah.
And then you take it from there and continue to develop it and
then
develop the
we
processes.
fully implement and go from there.
How long will that take?
To be perfectly blunt, we've already started on a lot of this stuff, because even if it's not approved, we're still going to do the relationship stuff. We're way down the road because we need to do that. And so we've started some of these goals, but it would be better if it was part of our full plan. But we're not gonna let the grass grow long on our, we're gonna get after it.
Okay.
Like I said, we've got 3 or 4 brainstorming things going, and a lot of people already brainstorming ideas if these are approved. Okay. In the fall, we're looking for some big changes in the fall. Some of these are going to take longer, but particularly on the relationship, wellness, mindset, some of those things, those are things that we're going to hit the ground running on day 1. So that's our thought, at least. Am I right on that, team? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Scott?
Pretty lofty goals. The problem is the truth. Is when you talk about 5 years of graduation and 66%, nobody said that it's only 20% have bachelor's degrees. Never has been told to students. They've been lied to for years. So when are you going to tell them the truth? Out of the 100% that you send to college, being the 60+%, 20% are going to wind up with bachelor's degrees, the rest are associate degrees, and continue on and on and on. So that's the problem with it. Students are told something different. They incur college debt. They go in there with lofty goals. They don't succeed. And they fail. So if 20% of your 66% are bachelor's degrees, initially when they're all signing up, they believe they're going in for bachelor's degrees, and some reduce it to 2-year associate degrees. I personally had it happen with my son, and he headed off from Brighton to Western Michigan University, and I sat in orientation with him, and the engineering instructor said there'll be 30% of you left at the end of the class, first year. He was 100% correct. So I went and picked my son up and brought him back home, and we did 2 years. He did 2 years of community college, which is where he should have started. He was more ready for that than he was for the university in mechanical engineering at the time. And he's now completed his bachelor's degree in his last class at University of Michigan. Currently, I'm very proud of him. But initially, it was a huge blow. Huge for him. It took him years to pick it back up, to say, he's very intelligent, but on his pace, different pace necessarily than everybody else. So that's the problem I have with these dream sheets.
So look, I'm going to just,
Go ahead.
I appreciate what you're saying, but we've accounted for that. So 60%, 66% college readiness standard doesn't mean that you have to go to college. Okay. That means that based on the SAT scores, that in their reading and ELA, that they have met certain standards. It's a way for us to measure what we're doing in the classroom.
Or
You're about right where we are at graduation percentages, though. Brighton High is one of the best graduation rates from college of any of the high schools. We've done a phenomenal job of preparing the kids.
And I'm not knocking that at all. What we're trying to do is stretch to the next level. So when we,
I'm just throwing in
so,
what really
but on
happens.
the achievement side of it, what we did is we looked at the districts that are scoring the best in the state of Michigan, and we looked at it, and 66% is the average of where those school districts are at. Those are the ones that are considered the top tier districts.
That's in being proficient and ready to leave for college.
So that's one piece of it. But if you look at the second goal, it's about college. It's not just college. It's about continuing to learn beyond Brighton. And that is the key thing. It says here, continue their education at four-year university, a community college, a certification-based trade school, a career technical internship program, enlist in the armed forces within 1 year. Every kid's, they have different pathways. Every student's on a different pathway. And that's part of what's embedded in this, is that students have choice. We have different skill sets, different interests. So I would say that we have accounted for students, different learners, pretty well with this plan.
Except the 100% that leave for the four-year university, only 20-some% make it. That's the numbers. It's
Maybe statewide. In Brighton, it's much higher than that.
Brighton's way higher.
Right.
I didn't say it was. It's good. Like I
Yeah.
said, we have worked very hard, and our staff and everybody getting the college kids, getting them ready to go.
Right.
But like I said, it's also an expectation, like you're saying, have them college readiness. Well, I'm telling you, when you go to leave for the university and they start a mechanical engineering program, that professor laid it on the line. I listened to him. It was great. He laid it all on the table. He said, this is a serious thing, and you're going to get a stamp and a degree from this place. You will know your information when you leave. So you better be ready. So now are all young people ready at 17 years old to take on that discipline? No, obviously they're not. They're still good kids though. So what's happened though, Dr. Outlaw, and I'm just sharing with you, the dream sheet of that is wonderful. The implementation is, should they go off to two-year college? Should they go to trade school? Should they go to work in school? We have 0 co-op students currently, not one, learning and figuring out what trade they might want to go in. That's just unbelievable to me. So at the time when I was in Brighton High School, we had 300 of them. And many of them, you'll speak locally in local facilities and big shops. They went to General Motors. They went here. They worked downtown at Colt Park Insurance. They worked at so-and-so's law firm. They worked as a secretary. They worked as all that. So that's all part of this community-based learning, where students are given an opportunity to stretch their wings a little bit and looking at raising this percentage of success. Because obviously if you go in with your eyes open and let's say that you're not ready for Calc 16 when you're 17, then you would go to the community college, work a little bit, get yourself geared up, and talk to a lot of successful engineers. That's how they've done it. So I think this is all good as a dream sheet. I'm just telling you a little reality. Some students are way more prepared than others, and we shouldn't have the ones that aren't prepared set up not to be successful. They should give them, like you said, the pathway. Here's where you're at. The thing is, through counseling and where we wind up at the end of the year right now, coming out of COVID, I am very concerned of who's ready and who's not ready.
So just to clarify, the indicators of success, this is our report card.
Yeah.
And it's, if we're doing the right things in the classroom, we're challenging students, we create that environment, the optimal environment, we've got the right curriculum, instruction, assessment, intervention, all those things.
Right.
Our test scores should go up for everyone. They should go up. So we have to have a spot where we can reflect as a school district. And this is a measure that we think is meaningful, and it will show growth in the classroom. Whether I go from the 20th percentile to the 30th percentile, or I go from the 80th to 90th, we're still going in the right direction. And that's what we have to look at. Our goal is that every kid's moving forward, every kid, every student.
I believe that's the intention of everybody.
And just to clarify, agree with you completely on the career part. We've set that as a very high priority. We've actually started a lot of brainstorming on that. And in our curriculum instruction area and our goal 2, we're heavily focusing in on careers. And one of the things that we are really hoping to do is getting students into the field with real world experience. It's something you've talked about with STEAM, but going beyond that with all of these different careers. We've had a lot of conversations about that already. And that's something that we think would be very beneficial to the school district, especially to our seniors as they're getting closer to making some decisions. If they get out into the field and they can see things firsthand, get real world experience, externships, internships, we think that'll help them define their path.
Well, Bonnie Ryuta is in my office the other day. Remember Bonnie? Remember Bonnie Ryuta? She's brilliant. And I explained to her where we were at, and her and her husband were there, and Jerry Lester and Serena Lester. We had a big meeting at the office. It was great. It was odd. It happened by accident, but they all were there at the same time. And they've been my mentors for my lifetime, actually. Jerry being my principal at Brighton High School, and Bonnie came in and helped us a lot. And I met Bonnie years ago when I'd interview her students during co-op. I interviewed dozens and dozens of Brighton High School students back then, personally. And today is not that different. It's just we've elected not to do it. The industry is absolutely starving for young people that can come in and have excitement, be enthused about what they do and figure it out. So for some reason, we just turn the valve off. And we don't have to go very far to figure that out. It's been shut down. Hold on now. It was shut down. At one time, before I left the board, I think we got ourselves up to 60 students, give or take. And then they, you can say COVID or whatever got involved. No, it was wound down to like 6 or 8 and then to 0. And staff and personnel wasn't directed towards it. We as a board agreed to pay, I brought it to the board actually, to pay a fee to our teachers. So they didn't have to do it for free to oversee it. And we all agreed to do it. I think it was a couple $100 per student to oversee the co-op. And that was done as a board. So they would have extra pay to oversee it. But no one's overseeing anybody. So you could have 10 students, you'd have a $2,000 bonus if they were in co-op. So the management, and the reason it cued this in my brain was Bill's conversation about oversight and who's going to really take care of this stuff. We have the best plan in the world, which a lot of this has very good stuff. But if we don't have maintenance of that plan and management oversight that's continuous, people just don't do it. People, what I found is people take the least, you can pay them the most sometimes, and still they'll take the effort sometimes turns into doing other things than working. And I'm sorry, but it's human nature. I would never say our staff would ever do that though, but there's a percentage that do.
Right. So I know we've talked about this, that co-op rules changed on one side about 10, 15 years ago and across the state that co-op as it used to be doesn't exist. People used to be, deliver passes from the office. Those have all been nixed. Going and working at McDonald's and things that people used to do when I was in high school for co-op, those are no-goes now. The other piece is the graduation
It's not
requirements.
true though, Matt. Dr. Earl, I had co-op students that got reviewed and they worked for me at our
100%.
business.
It's
Currently,
still
like,
possible, but that's why the numbers are down. It used to be a lot larger because it was different. What we were talking, and I just shared our conversation.
Government got involved and made it work better, it sounds like.
Work better? No,
No, there's 0. If government got
Yeah.
involved, it works lousy.
So-
Let's face it, this is a board deciding if we want to help these students create a good life and a good
So
future.
the other piece in that's caused the decline in numbers is that when I started teaching, the only course that was officially required in the state of Michigan was civics. That was the only thing you had to take. Everything else, there was flexibility. Locally, we would decide how many English classes and whatnot. The state now requires 17 credits. They tell you this is what you must take. So by doing that, it's taken some of the choice away. It's changed a little bit in the last few years where we're starting to get more options and more like personal curriculum and things like that. But what I know we've had the conversation a little bit about what's that next iteration of that. We really think that going into internships, externships, building directly with careers, just like what you're talking about.
It's the same technically.
It is. Co-op is different than what I think where we want to go. We want to go where students are having experiences with careers versus jobs. And that is, I think that's what you've been doing with this industry to education groups. Those are exposure to careers. And so I would just say that I think we would agree on that.
Believe me, I
that's
want to agree
important.
on something, trust me. I do.
Mhm.
I do. But I can tell you right now, you have 0 students. And as this goes, to me, I'm just going to share how I hate to do this, but I'm telling you the truth. I think I'm a total failure, but I haven't been able to fix this. And I don't fail really at anything in my life. I've never failed. I don't fail. The issue is, in this, I failed these students. I brought it to everybody's attention. I brought it to administration's attention for months. I brought it to administration's attention last year. And I have failed the students. So in that, I take it very seriously. I know what they learn when they're in co-ops / internships. I know what happens. I know the health that takes place, the healthy environments, the different things they bring back, the learning, everything that happens. I've seen it develop the students many times over, by the dozens now. Okay, so personally, I've seen it in my business, but I've seen the results from other businesses as well. So all this good stuff for these kids, where is it? What's the holdup? We have an unlimited budget to pay for it. There's nobody here that ever said we wouldn't spend money on anything that would be good for kids. Not one time that we've brought stuff in front from coaches, the coaching staff for our extracurricular stuff, for Science Olympiad, or everybody here said, no, if that's good for students, they'd pay for it. No different than the $200 stipend to pay the teachers the extra money to oversee co-op. So why is it in this massive industry, we can fall so flat on that?
And I know I would push back a little bit on it, and a lot of our electives are based on student interest.
This is after school. This would be 7th hour or later. This has nothing to do with school.
But students give up time during the school day in order to
7th
do
hour,
it. So
no.
you're saying to do an extra hour.
We had it. It was already approved in
We
the
have,
contracts.
2/3 of our students are involved in sports. How many are in band? How many,
What
all
are
these
things
things.
going for them, though?
I'm just saying that students have choices, and I think we're making an assumption that there's a backlog of a ton of students that want to be in that program.
Working?
I think that we are, I think that there are students that are involved. You've got, Matt Jordan's got all kinds of students that are going. I was just talking to one of our leadership
We had
students
7 last
about
year.
an incredible internship she's going to be doing. She's working 40 hours a week for an engineering company all summer long. And who set that up? A Brighton area schools teacher facilitated that opportunity for that student. And so it's happening. Can we grow? Yes, that's why we put it in here, and that's why it's a goal moving forward.
Matt had 7 last year. Personally, I've had a couple already this year. Now, individually, that's technically not his or my position to have to do that. And Bill's the one that brought this to head just a minute ago. Who is overseeing these great opportunities? The teachers Matt has a full life to run besides organizing, getting jobs for every one of his kids. And I do too, but I've done it. You can meet all the students. Actually, you saw a lot of them at the STEAM Center who are working in engineering. They're working as mechanics. They're working wherever, because we're able to make phone calls to help them get started. And then they get the opportunity to prove themselves. That's all I have to say about adding things and adding new things. This is critical that we implement programs, and each piece of it gets done to the level of the expectations of the people in this elected board, not just our staff. And when that staff changes or retires, that we don't lose all that momentum, like when Bonnie Ryuta retired back years ago. And then she came back as our interim superintendent. She, the programs, she might have been the one behind the co-op program, for all I know, / intern program. She had hundreds of kids working. I asked her. The magic, okay? So I that's my expectation, though, is that we come up with ideas and plans that get done, and not excuses and why it doesn't get done. This is critical. And
I think we would agree that exposing students to careers is an essential part of the strategic plan.
But I don't think seniors is critical. I think it's before that. I think the senior year, the decisions have already been made.
The goal is it's a K-12 goal. It actually starts very early, and that is our goal. Our initial brainstorming is a systematic K-12 approach to career awareness and implementation.
Bingo.
We agree that it's essential. The whole committee agrees, and that's why it's a goal.
Visitors to class, I've heard from our students, and I can share with you one in particular, came in the 10th or 11th grade at Brighton High School, someone in, I'm going to say it was biomedical engineering. His name was Joel, the student's name. Anyway, nice young man. He said when that person came into class and talked about things, it got him excited. He figured out a direction he wanted to go. And next thing you know, he goes as one of our top students to the University of Toledo and graduates with top grades. He had a great job. Things didn't go so well after that, though. So this idea of working and building skills is very important. And it can start early. The earlier, the better. That's the other thing. Corrective action versus proactive action. We can be so proactive in the middle school level and in the high school, which we're working very hard on. I know we talked about having leadership from industry come in as well at the middle school level and starting as much exposure early. But earlier is better rather than remedial. We need to
We
be very
agree. That's why we're
proactive.
starting kindergarten. We agree.
I'm in,
Completely.
like I said, but the sooner the better. And these kids are so smart. They're a blast. So just give them a chance. Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you.
Dr. Krebs?
Okay, so, under the culture to learn growth, I understand that it depends on the baseline. What kind of percentages are we looking at for these kinds of goals? We have the X percentages right now.
So we struggled with a little bit because we have not done a baseline survey. We thought we would start with a baseline survey and then set our growth objectives based on what that
Give an
initial.
indication, like, kind of like, what are you expecting?
I'm not 100% sure. I think that there's going to be plenty of room for growth. That's what we think. And it's going to be really important that the goals that we write, and we've talked about this, and we've seen some drafts of things, that it's very easy to understand. Sometimes questions can be written where students, where like leads them to the question, answer that you want them to do. It has to really get to the information that we need to get from our students. So.
When do you think you'll have that kind of information about what your goals are?
Yeah, so that's one of the questions. We have to figure out when to do that. Ideally, in a year by year, just in my head, I would love to have like February be a feedback month where we do feedback from staff, we do feedback from parents, we do feedback from students, we gather information going into our school improvement planning and reviews and planning for the following year. I think that would be a good time for us to do it each year. A baseline survey, if we move forward, I'm not sure that we'll be able to get it done by the end of the year, but maybe we do it right at the beginning of the school year, and then maybe we do it at the end of that same school year to be our first benchmark. So probably fall would probably be the best time. Okay.
So I want to kind of take a step back to address some of the things that have been already raised this evening. So this is really the macro view of the goals and objectives that are part of the 5-year plan. And as I understand the process, we as a board will approve the strategic plan. And once that's approved, then the next phase will be the development of the programming that will advance the objectives. Is it the expectation that that phase 2, if you will, of what programming and whether it's increasing co-op or whether, whatever programming or initiatives that the administration feels will be the best means of advancing these objectives, are they going to come back to us for approval, or is that something? Is the idea? No. Historically, as I understand it, the board has just adopted the strategic plan, and then it's then fallen on the administration to develop the programming.
Yep.
Or what if, I know the finance was a piece of past strategic plan. So whatever the work that was being done to advance any of those objectives, that was then at the administrative level. And then the reporting back would then be the mechanism to ensure that those benchmarks are being achieved. So that's just the overall process. I understand. Absolutely.
So going back to the thing with the peers, we would say this is the data. This is how this is how we achieved that progress. Right. And we'd say we instituted a lunch buddies program, and this is how it works. And we'd have whoever led that program talk about it, and share that data. So yes.
So, okay, so, and I think it's important to not lose sight of what is the purpose of this document and how it fits within the process of, this is the macro goals and objectives, and then the boots on the ground or program, whatever you want to call it, the nuts and bolts of what's going to be implemented, that's going to be the next step. And then I agree with Mr. Trombley. I think it's important that we get the continuous feedback to make sure that the things that we're working towards, accomplishing these goals and objectives. following up on a question that Dr. Krebs raised. So on the culture and learning growth, the culture for learning and growth component on the indicators of success, I appreciate the fact that it's without, we don't really have a baseline because we've had the surveys, but how, when it comes, this document is going to be, I believe, submitted for, or the administration is going to ask for us to approve this at some point in the next 30 to 60 days. So we're not going to have that baseline feedback. How is it, when it comes back to us, are you looking for us to just approve it now with just an X and then we will amend it? Or is there going to be some educated guess as to what you would like to have the baseline? I just want to try to understand.
So, there's been good conversation on this about, there was, suggestion of saying, improving, but I don't think that if it's not measurable, it doesn't have as much meaning to it. It's great for us to say, we had 50% of students that were here in the fall and here we are in the spring and now it's 65. And, so we can measure. So I would prefer it to be X with the idea that we're going to come back with the baseline. And maybe we have a revision in the fall with the baseline numbers, if that's okay with the board.
Baseline numbers and then a goal. So a goal once.
Absolutely. The baseline numbers and say, this is what our goal is, by year. So, yes, so that's what I prefer, but I'm open to suggestions on that one. We're struggling with how to do that because,
For example,
qualitative data.
right, and so on the well-rounded component, where it's X% of students report that they participated in a learning experience outside of the school day, sports, clubs, activities, community ed class. I would think that we would have that data right now of what, at least at the high school level. I mean, it might be more difficult at the elementary level to, have some sort of confirmation of who's in scouts or who's doing some other out-of-school activity. But at the high school level, I would think we would have an idea of, out of all 2,000 approximately students, we have this many students that have it, that check at least one of these boxes, that they're either in sports or, they're taking these other, or the clubs, or, I think it would be helpful to know what that number is right now.
Okay.
At least at the high school level.
Yeah. So, we could probably fill in a few of these, but the one caveat might be is that we tried to have it where it's not only school activities, it could be, like you said, scouts or things that are connected. It could be, church,
Sure.
youth group that they're heavily involved with, or they're in, some sort of sport that's not even connected to the school, whatever it might be, karate, and we don't have it. Well, that's great. They're involved. So there's some of that data. So I think our number would be higher than what we would have. But I think we can make some estimates on it, just so that we have a placeholder at least.
Yeah. Okay. And so just getting back to the process, Dr. Allah. So if any of the board has any further comments or questions related to this, because right now we're just, this is our opportunity to talk about the document. Obviously we received some additional information. Perhaps we could, if certainly welcome any input. If everyone wants to have another opportunity to have further discussion at a future meeting before we bring it back for approval, I mean, what's your preference?
I don't think we have a choice. This is big time. This is a big situation as far as taking on this decision to implement and then follow through. As Bill Trump, I'm on what Bill said right from the beginning, because following through, maintaining, teachers retire, how are you going to maintain? You're going to continue the same standard of service. And I've handed this out. I want to remind ourselves, this is, don't forget, under Michigan law, the Board of Education has the ultimate responsibility to educate the students, provide for the safety and welfare, and so on. I want to remind us of that. We've taken on an oath of office to do this and to look at in the best interest of the students, not what the employees want to do. What we believe as an elected board and body, we listen to their best interests and what they believe is the best thing to do. We are responsible to make sure that if you're from the farming community, you're from the legal profession, you're from the teaching profession, construction, whatever it is, we're elected to do this. And it talks specifically about setting the curriculum and courses taught in schools and upholding that. So if we approve a document, we're responsible that that document gets upheld. And so administration and our staff have to bring to us the procedures on how they're going to do that. And like you suggested, Roger, which I believe should be the case, if any of us have ideas, that's what we're supposed to do. Whether it's co-op or whether it's this or whether it's that, and then see how they can maybe put that in. And if we approve of all that, we would then stamp and seal it. But let's take the bigger leap and do this at a level of very high competence that if in fact person A moves and they're part of this group, and let's say the top 10 of the group that they're in there, then the next person can pick that up from a written standard and continue that same program and then be held in a, not in a negative way, but held accountable and know what their job outline is to do. So we get the same outcome so we can build from it. Because if we don't have a building block starting point, that just doesn't ever go anywhere. In public education, a friend of mine, which was in my office, Jerry Lester, he explained to me about how rules and regulations get put on schools all the time, and then it changes 5 years later, and they have to redo this. And he said it's just been really hard for the educators to, it's like, what's next? So here's a what's next. But we need to do a good job so the educators buy into it, and we can support them through everything throughout the school in a business sense, because it can be successful. And you can do a lot of this that he's talking about, or the group is talking about. It's very possible. But there's also all these other trigger words in here that are things that some people won't support. Some of the social emotional stuff and different things and how it's brought into the system. It's not always, always the best interest for the kids, in my opinion. And I understand why. But really, aren't we supposed to teach them all these fundamental skills that make them successful young people, that give them self-confidence on a daily basis? Like I said, and again, we use personal experiences all the time. I graduated from Brighton, won a competition in automotive. That was a big deal. Dan Stremick taught us all, and it was a big deal for me. I went off to college and did a 2-year college and 4 years of part-time, but I knew I needed to go to school on top of what I graduated with. It was just a starting point. We have starting points all over the place with 6,000 kids. That's our job. And like I said, a lot of things. And every family has a different dynamic at their kitchen table. So it's hard. It's like, geez, they're over here, they're whatever. The mom and dad aren't home and the kids are running amok, or whatever it is. And we have to take that all into account. But I'm absolutely sure that people care that work here. So this could be great. This could be.
But just to clarify, I hear what you're saying.
I know.
And,
Well, I know you care about the kids, Roger. We can argue about whatever. I know you care about them.
But what I'm saying is just not to focus on the co-op thing, but
Not at all.
in terms of the process for this document, what should happen, as in my opinion, is there shouldn't be a request to add we want to put in here where we have at least 25 students, co-op students.
No.
We have at least 200 band students. We can't get into the weeds on this document. This is the macro objective. The things you guys are talking about is the implementation, which that's where you get into the programming, whether it's co-op, whatever it is,
I like the drama. I love all that stuff. I think it's great. You see those kids, it's just wonderful experiences. They go with them for a lifetime.
So what I'm suggesting is that, and first of all, let me also say that I know that there's some of the committee members are here this evening. We very much appreciate,
Yes,
I know there's been
the
a
hard work.
significant amount of time
Yep.
and energy and hard work and thought that's gone into the development of this document, and we very much appreciate, the effort that you all have put into it. It is definitely very much appreciated. I think it really is a great goal-oriented overview and plan that is, that's worthy of, the pursuit for our district. I really, believe that. And I know that we talked about, obviously, the indicators of success in terms of the percentages that we have for those who will be post-secondary attainment. We talked about that earlier this year. So I don't want to lose sight of the process. And all I'm suggesting is that if anyone has any further input or comments or questions regarding the macro plan of, rather than some of the programming and the implementation that will advance these goals, That's what we need to focus on now. We can have further discussion once the plan is approved in terms of the implementation and the programming and the reporting back to make sure that those items that are being adopted and put into place by the district will be advancing these goals and objectives that we've approved. So I just wanted to clarify the process. So let me-
Ask you this then. What would be the delay, or why would we delay this much longer then, in the fact that I don't think that any one of us sitting up here are going to come up with some revolutionary idea that's not covered in this plan? Okay? So we sit here and we look at it for 2 more weeks. What good does that do?
The only thing I would say is, out of deference, I know that Mr. Stahl and Mr.
Well-
they couldn't be here this evening.
I get it, but they've had this as well, right? They've had an opportunity to look at it.
And there's been times where we've postponed action, when you weren't here, Mr. Conley wasn't here, so I'm trying to be fair.
Well, no, I get that, but my point also is if they've got a time and effort, and it sounds like we're talking February, I think they would like some direction to continue to keep moving on this, I'm assuming.
I mean, I have
It's-
no problem if we want to put it,
Well,
we were talking about having a June 6th workshop for the bond, right? The June 6th. So I don't have a problem if we want to put it on, that being a single for action, that would give Mr. Stahl and Ms. Reed any further opportunity to ask questions. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I was just opening up if you guys wanted additional time. If you don't, that's fine.
well, again, I don't see any one of us coming up here and changing a whole paragraph worth of, maybe somebody might have an idea to tweak with a word or two, which I think could be done, whether it's passed or not. I don't think, but I don't think the idea and the concept and the process, anyone, whether Alicia or Stahl, I don't think they're going to change this whole document in what their input would be. It's not that I wouldn't want their input, but why delay it? Let's keep it moving forward, and let's tell them to keep working on it, and that we're going to go ahead with it. And again, if they want something changed, why couldn't it be changed?
Well,
And I'm saying, again, I don't think it's going to be a whole document. It's going to be a few words or a paragraph or a sentence or something that might get changed at the most.
right, fair enough. I'm not suggesting either one of them will have any wholesale changes. They may
Right.
not have any changes.
Exactly my point.
All I'm saying is, I think they were both planning on being here, and circumstances at the very last minute prevented them from doing
Yeah.
so. So I haven't had any conversation with them in the last 48 hours of, if they're gonna have specific changes. I don't know that it makes a big difference. I mean, is 2 weeks gonna make a difference if we put it on for approval on June 6th?
Yeah, so I was looking at that June 13th was our next official board meeting. I thought that would be a great time because it would be the end of the year as we're kind of making our final plans. And then if people can have more time to digest if they wanted, ask questions, we're going to come together on the 6th if more time was needed for discussion.
That's a good
If-
idea
if-
personally, but I have one thing, if I might. Where's last 5 years plan?
So it's on the website. Yeah, it's in the school board section, under strategic plan. So
I
it's-
believe it'd be a really good idea for our board to review the last 5-year plan and see where we're at on it and see how we met.
The last 5-year plan expired in 2020. It was from 2015 to 2020. Of course, COVID hit, Dr. Gray retired, so we couldn't even do this process until we had, Dr. Allo on the saddle.
To get it put back in.
I mean,
Okay, I got
I know that we reviewed that strategic plan,
I
my
remember.
second year or third year.
That's right.
And at that point, I believe virtually every single one of the objectives had been met.
Okay.
Now, the format of that plan was different. It wasn't, this is, as I would characterize it, this is more of a plan that's focused on student achievement and measure, a more objective measurable of success of all students, regardless of where they are, within, their areas of interest, et cetera. Whereas that plan was more cursory with respect to broader issues, like it had a whole
District as a
finance.
whole.
Right, so it had finance, a component, it had a transportation component, and a facilities component. So it had a lot of different components, but weren't analyzed or didn't have, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying that was the format in which that plan was.
That's my purpose of bringing it up, because here's the situation. Does that mean we're not going to think about that stuff anymore? Because a lot of it led to some of the successes that we've had. And some of the, I'm telling you, we're not, when I brought up the point about not having co-op and we discussed the student graduation rate, we are the highest in the county from college graduation that there is, right? In Livingston County, our students are doing better and getting better. So there's good things going on and we're trying to make it better. But this issue, we don't want to forget that. We might want to look at this prior strategic plan and say, we don't want to abandon those principles and we're going to add these to them, kind of thing, versus.
But I'm not so sure that this is the overall district strategic plan for the next 5 years as to how everything's going to operate.
It says right on the top of it,
It
regarding
comes to
education, it is.
our core business.
Yeah.
Our core business is teaching and learning.
Yeah.
That's the core
Oh,
business.
right.
The strategic plan for the core business of what we do
It's teaching and
is
learning.
teaching and learning.
Right.
And then there's other aspects that go along with it.
Buildings,
Right.
operations plans. This is for students. This is, I think Roger summarized it very well. The vision on this is about the student experience in the Brighton area schools.
Right.
Very, very focused, purposely focused, very specifically on the student experience, because that's why we're here. That's why we exist. So that's, like I said before, you have to have the best teachers in place. You got to bring them in and retain them. You have to take care of your finances so that you can pay for this stuff. You have to have your buildings running out, all these things you have to do. But those are prerequisites to being able to do this. So those are conditions. So that was the look at it as we went into this plan. So, and just so you know, we did look closely at the last plan also. We didn't go through because it wasn't, it wasn't like we'll achieve this percentage. It was a lot of, I agree. I think a lot of things were accomplished in that previous plan.
Well, they need to be.
So what's the plan moving forward with
So-
this then?
So, I mean, in terms of the timing for the adoption, we can have further discussion the 6th. If ultimately the board wants to have it up for action on the 13th, I will tell you, I will not be here on the 13th. I'll actually be out of the country. But I fully support this. I don't anticipate there, it being a 3-3 tie with me being the deciding vote. So I don't have a problem with it being on the 13th. I just won't be here. But I fully support this. I think.
Or
this
it
is-
could be on for action on the 6th.
Right, or it could be on for action on the 6th, either way.
So any other questions at all? Feel free to give me a ring if you wanted to talk about any of these things. And I appreciate you looking at it. And again, I appreciate the committee, the 47-person committee.
Yes, thank you.
It was some really good work done and it's continuing to happen. So
Great, all right.
thanks.
So that moves us to the next item on our work session, which is robotics room location. Dr. Owen?
Yeah, so I can just start on this one. I don't know how long this conversation needs to be, but I think we need to give a direction to the robotics about where they're going to land, where's home base going to be. I know we've talked about this a little bit. Currently, the robotics team has 2 classrooms in the D wing that they have, and then they're kind of they're trying to find a permanent location. There's been 2 locations that have been proposed, and just looking for maybe like a consensus so that we can tell robotics this is where you're going. That's what I'm hoping for tonight. One would be to go to the TIPS room. TIPS is the adult transition classroom. It's very, it's obviously very close to the STEAM Center. That would require our adult transition special education program to move to another location. And then for us to do some pretty considerable construction for that new location. I think the idea was that they would move to where Matt Jordan's current classroom is, more in the main building, but we'd have the 88 bathrooms, and there's been a lot of money put into kitchens and all these things that the board has invested in that TIPS program to make it, a really nice program. And so that's the TIPS room. It is a really nice room from the robotics side. It allows them to do everything they need to do. It has high ceilings where they can shoot balls in the air and things like that. So I know that is a room that would be nice, but TIPS is a great program, and that is educational program. And then directly next door to the tips room is our current health occupations room. We had our closed session in there. That's that large room that's at the very end of the building. That's right down the hall, basically from here to the STEAM Center. And that's the administrative proposal is that that would be the location for robotics. I think it's a great location. It's got a lot of room. It's got the outside door access. I think the only downside is that they would go into the STEAM Center to practice with the robot of shooting balls in the air for the higher ceilings. But it's, they can drive down the hall and use the STEAM Center. But tonight, looking for consensus from the board. Are we going to pursue this tips? Because then we need to go down the pathway of talking to the construction and get that process going. Or are we going to do the health occupations when the health occupations moved into the new room? So looking for board consensus tonight so we can let robotics know where their permanent home will be.
So I think one of the things we really want to make sure is that we really take care of the TIPS students. I mean, these are the vulnerable population. We don't want to just toss them out. We want to make sure that they have the best environment. This is an academic situation for them. So we need to keep the academics front and center, that this is academic. They're using this year round or the entire academic year. So it really makes sense to me to keep them in this room that's already set up and designed for them. How often, I mean, I think we do want to support, I'm not saying not to support the robotics, but if they can store everything in the health acts, when they need to go out to the STEAM Center, they have that, it's available. This is the reason for building it. So I like the administration's recommendation. I would support that.
Get them extra shelving and things like that to help us. There's a lot of stuff that they need to store, but also the auto lab and equipment, that's all in that area. It's would be really nice for them to have a home base in that wing.
So
Thank you.
going back to the original idea of TIPS moving to the old bus garage, which is where they are now, wasn't because it was an ideal situation for them. In fact, they didn't even have the stuff they needed to be able to operate down there. It was horrible. And I don't know who decided to push them down there, but somebody did. And basically they were stuck down there. I think going to Jordan's classroom, which is in the middle of the school, which is right by Jody Reneker's room. There's already a kitchenette in Jordan's room, which wouldn't have to be added like we had to in the current room they're in. The ADA bathrooms are right there because, again, it's right next to Jody Reneker's room, and those are the bathrooms that they use now. And then from the robotics standpoint, what a shame this year that those kids couldn't even find a place to practice. And, the robotics team was a world champion a few years ago. It's dwindled down to 2 or 3 people. Finally, it's being built back up. These kids that are involved in that need that program. It helps them. It keeps them busy after school. There couldn't be a better room in the high school other than maybe the field house or the gymnasium for the robotics kids to be in. And I believe with that height that's in there, and that's the key, in my opinion, is the height. Because it'll give them the ability to be able to shoot the ball, those kind of things where for instance, Jordan's room or the current health ops room, the height just isn't there. I don't think TIPS requires having high ceilings. They're not in there shooting basketballs and things like that. Those kids, they go to the gym, they go to the track, they go to the different areas for that type of exercises and things. Robotics, you have to move everything to go. You have to move everything back out. I think it'd be fantastic if they had a place they could set their stuff up. They could come in, they could practice, they could use it. They wouldn't have to be kicked out. I mean, think about it. Every place they've been so far, they've been kicked out of. And I believe that's what cost them this year. Again, they had no place to practice. People are just pushing them out. And here they are. They got pushed out one more time. And now it's to the board table as to where they're going to go.
Where did they practice primarily when they won the world championship?
So at that time, they had the ability to practice in the shop, the auto shop. They had cleared it out, and that's because Rocky was also the auto shop teacher. So he was able to make space and kind of, because he was also the robotics coach. So that was able to work hand in hand. Now, the situation is now, I hate to say it, I've heard, and again, purely rumor, that, these people try to sabotage each other and hide stuff so they can't use it because they need it the next day, things like this. I mean, it's a shame that it's public stuff, but that's what's happening, the way I understand it. And these kids need a place where they can go, put their stuff, it won't get bothered, they can set it up, and they can go in there and practice and try again to recapture. I mean, this is a lot to those kids. And I'm not taking anything away from Tips. My only point is, I don't think Tips needs the height in their classroom compared to what robotics needs for height in their classroom.
How long has Tips been in that room?
I have no idea.
3 years. Well, since the last bond.
Since we moved Health X, but if I might. Sure. Okay. All right, so. More truth. Administration failed the robotics kids miserably. We got back to them this year. There were 2 kids left out of 80. All those kids were left to wander through COVID, no places to go, no projects to work on, etc. So Bill, myself, the superintendent, we all got together, stood there in the classroom and said, what are we going to do? We revised the team, brought them back to recruited. They went out in the hallways, recruited kids, got it on the message boards, put a good program together, wound up, 30 or 40th in the state out of 600 or 500 teams. They did very well. Very well. They were invited to the world championship in Texas. They turned it down because they couldn't win. And that's what their coach told them, unfortunately. So you don't win the state championship, we're not going to the world finals. So this all went on, very discriminatory, by the way. And as you guys know, I've worked with these kids since 2010, 11, firsthand, face-to-face, one-on-one. That end of the school was developed originally for technology and drafting and engineering and everything else back when it was originally designed. Bill and myself helped the TIC class get built. We moved health occupations out of the room. We showed up. It was dismal repair. Health occupations was a mess. Bill and I walked into the classrooms. We said, no, this isn't going to happen anymore. And then all at the same time, Tips got moved out of the choir room on the other end of the school. They were displaced because choir wanted it. So they were moved into a room that was not suited for them. And Bill and I got together and we stood in there and we looked it over. We talked to Lisa Johnson. And Bill and I think it was a November, Thanksgiving originally, then Christmas time, said it'll get done now, period. So those
Didn't even have
students,
hot water in the room.
they had nothing. So we renovated the school. Bill did, actually, right there. He was able to get the dollars appropriated to those classrooms to give them an environment that they needed to work in. And we 100% did everything we could to get them everything they needed. Those students deserve everything we can do for them.
And again, at that time, that was a temporary location for them.
Temporary, yeah. And then when we moved the Health Ox room into its current location, we also upfitted her classroom. So it was, you guys don't even want to know. I should have took pictures. So anyhow, how many TIP students do we have? 10 or 12? Do you know?
I'm not 100% sure.
Not many right now, but will cycle and there'll be more. And our cost for our programs for things like that, we know are much higher per student than they are for the normal student and per pupil funding and things. And I think our board has never, ever let them down. As far as when Bill and I found out, we did it. We brought it back and we made sure that these environments were good for the students. But with the STEAM wing development and doing the health ops development and looking at the concentrated effort on that end of the school for that type of stuff. And remember, heading for 70%, maybe 80% of the job opportunities in the market to come. That's what we're gearing for. And we would never, ever, I know when we originally suggested we move into Jordan's classroom, that suggestion wasn't to have lesser of a facility. It'd be a better facility. We can improve on what we've already done and make it better for the students and gear towards specifics of what the needs are, not just something we put together to, and we didn't make the last one to just get by with. It was done to what we believe needed to be done at the time to build the best program that would offer the students the best opportunity. Same as Health Ox was. Same as Health Ox is again, that we're doing this time. This is the next step to do better than we did the last time. And we can do the same thing with Health Ox, or not Health Ox, with the TIPS program, moving it and building them a place that's designed for them, not taking an industrial building and retrofitting it. This industrial building has more vision in it to come because not only it's not just robotics and throwing a ball in a world championship operation, it's the opportunity to develop the next engineering level classes in that end of the school. And those engineering classes are available for everyone, for all students of all levels to get them exposed to it. So that's to come. And I think we have to look at those future opportunities, and they're coming. We have to compete. And this is another opportunity how Brighton schools can kind of lead the way. I understand other schools are following suit with things that we've already done, including the STEAM centers and different things, which is great to do that and have them do it in their own schools. So this is another method, no different than the Health Ox.
I think Jordan's room is far nicer
It is.
for a classroom
It is.
and a setting for noise
The
and
environment.
acoustics and environment
The
compared
environment
to
will be
the
far better.
room they're in now.
And we can, again, no different than the investment we made for those students to put them where they're at. We'll make sure they have a better place than they have now. And again, looking at the future and development of that wing of the school for us in the engineering side, it's just, it makes total sense. And we're not taking anything away from anybody. We're going to add to it for sure. And our design team that's involved in this stuff, these guys are sharp. And our teachers that would be teaching these programs would have the input, just like they have in these other classes, to say, this is really what we need that we don't have here. And this is how we would go forward. So I think we should have that looked at and see what we would have to spend to do it and make it a permanent home. Like I said, they were displaced to where Choir is now. That was where they were originally at. I remember when they moved. And like I said, it wasn't because they were looking for a better place for them. They had a good place where they were at. They did. And, but I can share with you that Bill and myself and administration, once we informed people that we were able to get it done. And it was because Bill was able to do, and like the auto program, everybody forgets this. Bill's the reason all those got done. I didn't know how to do it all. Bill came in and said, this is how you have to manage to do this. And we need to remember that and be very grateful to what he's done for us. Those programs you see in there, Bill put that together. And it was sometimes we had to threat, we'd go do them ourselves. Remember? We were going to stay in the hallway if we didn't get them accomplished. So the kids would come back to school and they'd be ready.
So you're in favor of moving TIPS?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then we can look at that as part of the STEAM Center and the development of it. And it's not critical that they go. They're great. We have the kids come in and they stopped doing it, Roger. They were bringing the kids in like in the auto lab and they'd come in with their parapros. It was like the best thing I've ever seen. The kids would be in there working and they were happy and part of it. They can still come to that. And hopefully this get past this COVID stuff and they can have an hour in those labs, just like every other student, and have them come in there. Do you remember, Bill, when they started going in the auto lab? It was the best.
Yeah, they're detailing cars.
They had them working on the cars and it was like, again, it was just made my heart really feel good because we can do that as a community and as a school. And we can expose them to great things. And again, the brilliance is in them. Every child's gifted. I just know it now working with different kids. So we want to have as much exposure to that as we can. And I think build them their own classroom. We have the room to do it. We have no other pressing need for those 3 classrooms that Mr. Jordan was in. I think there's 3 of those that we opened up. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did.
Is it 3 of them?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's all
Yeah, there's 3 of
combined
them.
in one, yeah.
So,
it's a nice space. I mean,
and there's plenty of room. And I wouldn't recommend putting our TIPS program in the old Health Ops class. I think it's too small.
Oh, dark, too small.
It's too small.
It's
It doesn't
horrible.
have the environment, that's not what we want.
I don't even think that's on the table. is it?
No, I don't think so, but people, I've heard it, but I wouldn't do that. So,
But I think that since we already made the investment and specifically fitted that room for the TIPS program, I think we should keep the students where they're at. That's my opinion.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I think since we made the investment and specifically fitted the room, the TIPS room for the TIPS program, I think we should keep the students where they're at.
Well, we're going to have to invest more into it because it's still not up to the standards that are needed. So,
well, then you have to build a robotics room.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but I think
That's
the
fine.
question is, so if the TIPS room stays for the purpose for which it has been, and, I mean,
Well, it's
I
not,
think.
it's what it was modified to do.
Well.
Its
right,
original
right.
purpose was industrial. Facts,
Okay. And so in the 2012 bond, it was, the improvements were made to
later.
plan for the TIPS use.
Now is leftover money Bill used.
Okay,
was-
whatever,
right.
whether it was leftover.
It wasn't
so
planned.
The point is
Wasn't
that,
planned.
that the improvements were made.
They were.
Right. So. and-
Which
and
can be
I-
used
and
for
I- and
anybody.
I agree. I mean, I'm concerned about, now they're gonna be moved again. We're gonna keep moving them to accommodate some other use. I mean, I'm concerned about that. Obviously, I place a lot of faith in the administration's analysis of the issue, and your recommendation is to have what will be the old health ops room be the location for the robotics, right?
That would be the administrative recommendation. There's been conversations with teachers. Talked about it. The teachers are not in favor of moving to Jordan's room. They're going to go wherever they're asked to go. But the teachers of the TIPS program, that's a great location for the students, and I think they're very happy where they're at.
Can you say a little bit more about what it is that they like about that room? Do you know?
Yeah, I think I think space is one, the outside access for the coming and going, they're able to use that, there's a parking lot that's right there. I think that's a really nice area. There's some little features, and obviously the kitchen, some of the upgrades that have been done are excellent. There's space for them to do some things. One of the things that they're doing is there's an area in the front, and what they've done is part of the TIPS program is transitioning, learning life skills, independent living skills. Is they have a grant and they're converting an area that's like a storage room into like a little apartment so that they can learn they can learn the living skills, whatnot that they need to live independently. So that's another one. There's actually, sometimes students, have different needs. And I know that they have a little basketball thing, that's in there because they have the higher ceilings. That's really nice. The one thing I could say also about an adult transition program is a lot of the students, they've technically graduated from high school and they're in a transition program into independent living and into work. So a lot of times it's really nice when the students are able to have a separate space so they can feel a little bit like they've graduated from this part of the building and they've transitioned into this more career-oriented area. So I know that's an area of benefit. But those are some of the things that have been shared in that. The one thing I would say is I do appreciate like the TIPS room with the high ceilings. I mean, it is an industrial feel to that room, and I can appreciate hearing the background on it. If we had a big need during the day for space, for one of the things we had talked about is like, what if we did mechatronics or like we were over, like, would that be a spot? Like that might make sense if there were during the day programs that were going to be done in that room. That would probably be a stronger argument, I think, than it being, an after school activity. And I think that's
Well, that's the whole idea.
But
That room gets used for that because the development of an engineering center, that's what that's about. I need to share with you guys some more wisdom from your leadership at your school. I don't want you to forget this. Your leadership at Brighton High School wanted to cancel the robotics program 2011. Your leadership wanted to cancel the health occupations program as well. Your leadership wanted to wipe out the auto program. Gone. Now, this leadership is who you're relying on your information for. The same leadership that's in that high school is the same leadership that was wiping those programs out. And I will not hesitate to tell you that's the truth.
Yeah, this is the first time I heard
Now,
that any of
this-
the teachers were.
This is the truth. Now, the same administration that believes that the tips room should be maintained where it's at is the one who wiped out all those programs. And the only reason those programs exist is because myself, a board president, I went to the office and it was his job where those programs stayed. Now, that's how it is. That same administration is giving you the advice that you're getting today. They're incorrect.
They're also the ones that kicked him out of their other room
Oh, my
because the
goodness.
band
This-
wanted
This
it.
year has been awful for them. So the point though, those are the facts. Any witnesses want to remember that and write it down? Okay, those are the facts. So you're relying on that same administration to make this decision. Now that's inaccurate and bad knowledge. You guys, but that's a fact. Now we're going to go ahead and move forward and you're going to pigeonhole an 80-person team. That team is going to be 80 people strong next year. It will grow back to 80. 20 young men, 20 young women on the last team, 60 men from 4. And you're going to say, let's just stop that. We have 12 students who need special accommodations and the best we can offer them. 12. And you're going to displace 80. And I mean displace them.
Well, I disagree. Nobody's saying we're displacing.
You
we're
are.
Stopping robotics.
No, you're displacing them by putting them in a classroom that can't handle 80 students and can't handle any growth for engineering or any of the stuff that we've talked about. And you saw all those kids come to the STEAM Center, there wouldn't be a one of them there unless this board approved the stipend for the coaches for those academic competitions prior to you.
We've always supported robotics.
It's not that. It's the academic competitions and the academic things that turn into something that develop those students that came to your STEAM Center. You would have had zero. You would have had empty stands. The only reason you had those kids is because you got behind them. So
Can I ask this question? This is an honest question here.
go ahead.
Other than high ceilings, what's the difference between the two rooms for the robotics?
Square footage.
The square foot, the physical.
How much square footage difference is between the two rooms?
It's really not for robotics, Dr. Outlaw. It's really about the whole concept of developing into the next, like you brought up, megatronics and everything else. The goal is to create a nucleus for development and not stop development. And that's where, when Bill and I got together in 2011 and 12, we argued all the time and we looked at this stuff and really saw the development and what it did for the students. Look at what it's done for the students. We've grown to programs that they wanted canceled. By building the proper classroom for health occupations, look what happened. This is the same. This is an identical pattern. This is no different. So if we listen though to Gavin Johnson and the administration of that school, hold on, they don't have the vision. They wanted the kids, I was there. They didn't want a place for the kids to be. We got back to the robotics program. It had dwindled to 2 students this year. It's impossible that a program could go from 60 or 70 students to 2. How could that happen? Let's turn the valve off because it's not in their wheelhouse.
I would push back on.
Go ahead.
Obviously, we have opinions, whatnot, but I've been here for 2 years, and I think our administration cares about every single student.
It's
And
impossible. No, they don't.
I've seen them
They don't.
go above and beyond for every
Well, then why is
student.
robotics getting pushed out again then, out of their
So-
room because now
so
we get a chassis
currently-
dynos coming in?
So currently, the robotics team has.
Okay.
We voted to approve the chassis.
I know it. And now they're getting booted
Now
out
they're getting
again.
booted out.
We're putting them in a bigger room. I mean, that we're trying to.
It
No,
is.
we're not. It's a worse room.
Either one of these options, the robotics team's real estate is going to improve dramatically from this year to next year with whichever choice you choose here. That's
It's,
like
it's not just
debatable.
about robotics. That's what I'm saying. This is about a vision to build the next opportunity for Brighton area school students at the engineering level. This is not just about, the robotics team and starting when they leave school and the kids work 40 hours a week, as you heard. When they leave school, they come back and work 40 additional hours per week to get their program run over 3 to 6 months. And then there's summer programs this year. They'll be going to competitions this summer. They're going to run year round. this is what's going to take to get our kids on the right track. This is part of the health and wellness and everything else. These students they're active, they're busy, they have a place to go. These schools are theirs. No different than the 13 tip students or 12 tip students. Those students, we're not going to give them substandard classroom, give them the best there is. And we have the money to pay for it. Now, if we refuse to do that, and let's say we don't want to make these upgrades and we're going to walk away from, let's say we invested $50,000 in a tips classroom or 100 when we built it. The new students that move in there are going to get the same use of that classroom. That classroom is going to be used. And we modified an existing industrial arts classroom to accommodate the tips program. We're putting it back in industrial arts hands, and we'll move the tips room into one that we built for them. And we have taxpayers' money to use to do that. And I think that's totally lack of vision. And I'm telling you, the numbers I gave you from 2011 and 12 and this administration that you're taking advice from is exactly the ones who wiped out those programs. They're no different. And it was wiped out when we came back this year. They weren't looked after.
Mia, has every board member up here been to Jordan's classroom to look at it? And have you been to the tips room to look at it?
Yeah.
There's a big difference, isn't there?
Much nicer. It's way better.
I
So,
think be careful if we say what's nicer. I mean, I think we're talking about the vulnerable population.
yeah, and I take that very seriously.
And I think we really need to be careful that we're treating these students with the respect they deserve.
100%.
And I think,
That's why I say we sink the money into Jordan's room and make it,
And build it, build it for them.
I think that I've heard from Dr. Outlaw, there was a few things that really make this, that separating them from the rest of the school is a real advantage for them. This gives them a sense of graduation from the high school, that they're moving on, that they're adults. They won't have that in the Matt Jordan's classroom. They'll be going into the same old building they've been going into.
was that in regards to the apartment or in the classroom?
The transition piece,
Yeah.
I'm just talking in general. I had adult transition in Grosse Pointe and in Brandon. And one of the things that's part of that is in both of those locations, the programs advocated for an alternate location for that program that was away from the other students as part of the transition to independent living. So I know that
Why don't we take the current health ops room then and Jordan's room and give them the two separate rooms then? Or one room that they can be in and transition down into the other room? I mean, if that means something to be able to, like you said, to move down the way, I mean, to me, that would.
I was just talking about the idea of the separate entrance. That doesn't give them the separate entrance.
I see.
So I have a question. Is the plan that the robotics program are going to be using the STEAM Center for some of their practices, or?
They can, a little bit of it. They can't. Again, it just depends on what's involved in getting in there and getting out. They couldn't get in this last time because virtually it was under construction.
Well, in C of O, nobody could get in.
But then when it was done, they still couldn't get in. And so it became a problem for them.
well, I think that's the plan with it. I mean, either room, either whether it's tips or health ops, it's very close to the STEAM
operation.
center.
Yeah.
I mean, it's directly
That's
down
what
the
my
hall.
understanding
It's,
was,
you
the
know,
premise of some
20
of that
feet away
open
from-
area was that could be accommodated, that could accommodate the higher ceiling needs. Well, I mean, that was my understanding.
I don't think the idea of that auditorium was to have the robotic team in there practicing on a daily basis.
I didn't say that.
And leaving their stuff set up.
I didn't say on a daily basis. I said,
But that's
For 3 months.
Roger, but that's how often they have to practice during the competition in order to.
It's for 3 months. And the problem is they got to set up a stage and it stays set up and they can't keep taking it down. So and just so you know, part of the practice, you asked where they practice, I gave them a shop to practice in. And they practiced at my shop. I cleaned it out in the back shop, this 8,000 square footer. And then they went on to a consortium where the county rented spaces and all the robotics teams in the county got together so they could find a place to work together. And they actually competed against each other, which was great. So there's lots of things to develop, and it's between the schools in time. But I'm absolutely adamant about the vision of the people at Brighton schools when it comes to administration and one particular group of administrators that believe this is the right thing to do. They're the same ones that believed everything I told you. Close them all. That's it.
I just think that the moving the
12 students.
well, it's not about the number of students, John.
It's what they
every
need.
single student is important. I don't care if it's 12 or 200.
I agree.
Okay,
You
we have
have-
we have an obligation to look out for the best interest of every single
Who
student.
built the room
And
for me?
my
That's your
point
idea.
is that
So did Bill.
that I believe that the best compromise is to leave the tip students where they are in the location that was designed for them the last time. And
Retrofit.
also providing an opportunity for, obviously, a new space for the robotics program, rather than we're gonna choose one versus the other and then.
Not at all.
Well, that's the way I look at it. So
Well, I don't think we-
I think it's the best way to try to accommodate the best interests of both programs, in my opinion. I respect your opinion. You disagree, that's fine.
Well, it's not that I disagree. The issue is that we're not displacing anybody. We retrofitted that classroom to fit the needs for those kids. Not anybody else here. Bill and I did it, not the administration of the school. Bill and I personally
Okay,
did it.
good
But
for you.
remember,
Good for you and
I'm
Bill.
not looking for a
I'll
pat on the
wait.
back. I
I'm
don't want,
saying-
you've never heard it come from my mouth before. I'm telling you about the vision of who you're taking we'll call it the nod from. You're making a mistake. And here's why you're
I
making a
understand you
mistake.
think
The
that.
vision they had didn't incorporate everything they have today. The vision they had was Bill, myself, and the teacher. Nobody else. And that's how it went. And Bill pushed it through for those students, as well as the development of the programming. So, then it evolved to what it is today. So it wasn't built for them. It was modified for them to fit. This was not built for them. It was modified so they could make it work. Now you have an opportunity to spend a few $1,000s of the taxpayers' money and build one design built for their needs specifically by design. Now you're opting out of that. So it'll be, yes, you are. You're right today. You're going to say, even though this building was retrofitted and they're getting by with it, and now you have a choice to spend bond taxpayers' dollars to build a classroom specific for those 12 students that are the highest priority student that we have. You're saying you're not going to do it. That's it. And I'll go with, yes, you just did. So I'll go with it. And let's move forward because that can change shortly.
So,
Can I ask, so you're talking, how much space are we having for the robotics? So you're talking about the robotics moving into the Health Ops or Matt Jordan's room or both, or what are we looking at?
Well,
Because we're
that
certainly-
was the conversation here. So I think there's two options here. Home base would either be the health ops room when it moves to the new location, or the tips room.
If it was to move.
Whenever
Yeah.
we would be prepared to, I think we would have to do all construction and figure all that piece out. And when that room was ready, then it would become, so it's going to be like, tonight, that's what we're talking about, is one of those two locations. And again, both of them there's going to be more real estate. Robotics is going to have more real estate than they've ever had at any point at least in our school district. It is a lot of real estate.
Well, that's not totally true. They moved out of the health ops room because when I originally put the computers, we set up the health ops room that their health ops is in now. That was robotics. When we moved Matt Jordan out to his new classroom, we moved robotics into that classroom. And then we split them out of there again when we put health ops in there. Because if you recall, Bill, we put all the computers in there that Toyota donated. They donated a truckload of computers for engineering CAD because they didn't have a computer that could run fast enough to build the stuff they were doing. So they got moved again. So they're going to go back.
Currently, there are two classrooms in the D wing
Yeah,
that they have.
Yeah.
I know that they used the auto shop
Yep.
and all of that area. Obviously, that was this season as well. So that's for sure. So this would be more real estate, and this would be like a home base. What I would say with robotics is there is so much stuff that they have to store. So I think we would need to have shelving, whichever spot you're at, shelving and things like that, so that they're able to store equipment, robotics.
I think they're going to be happy no matter what, just so you know. I don't think that's.
But
an issue.
there's another thing that robotics needs is when they're planning, whiteboards and things for them to be able to plan. Like those are some of the things that would be really beneficial. And I think they could do either in either one of those locations. I think that if the, if there was nobody in any of these rooms, we might approach this differently, and it might not even be in this, it might be totally different. But robotics is an after-school activity. And, the other, our TIPS program is during the day program. So that's one other factor that weighs into it also. It's some pretty good real estate, but that's why we're here with the board. We're looking for consensus on this so that we can tell robotics, and if it's not ready to have that conversation.
3-2. I mean, obviously, we don't know where Mr. Stahl and.
Tonight's the night, though.
Well,
Well, it's
Here's-
actually on work session, so it's
Let
not
me
set.
remind you of something.
Right, it's not set, there's no act.
It shouldn't really need to be,
No.
just so you know.
Number one, it's not a lot of money for the robotics to move into the tips room.
It's
So-
zero.
That's zero. Let me remind you though, and I think this is a big disfavor because everybody wants, including myself, to give the best to tips we can give them. Tips has never had a room designed for themselves. It's always been another room that's been modified. In my opinion, with them going to Jordan's room, there's enough real estate, there's enough money, I believe, somewhere along the lines in this district that the teachers can sit down and put their heads together and actually come up with a room that they want to be able to use and have it designed and constructed to the best of their use with their input. They've never had input into any type of design of any room that TIPS has been into. TIPS has been misplaced just like robotics has. Originally they're in choir. Well, now choir wanted the room, so they get to move here. Now they come down here. They don't have hot water. They have nothing. So at least we get hot water in there. The teachers had nothing to say about that stuff. They had no input whatsoever. That's what they were told to do. I think by giving them an opportunity to have Jordan's room, we have Linhout on board. They can sit down with Linhout. They can come up with the ideal room they want to have that would suit them the best. Let them put it on the paper. Let them design it, and let's build it for them. And TIPS shouldn't have to move again for the entire time they're here. And it'll be built for them. It's right next to Jody Reniker's room. There's ADA bathrooms right there. What more do you need?
I thought that Dr. Outlaw said that the teachers want to stay in the tips room.
This is the first time I've heard of that. From what I've heard, I believe it's more the administration requesting that compared to the teachers requesting it. I don't think anyone's asked any of the teachers if they'd like to design a room that's best for themselves. Has that been the case?
I've had direct conversations with both of the teachers on
Okay,
that,
have
just
you
about
asked them to
this.
design a room that would be best for themselves?
So yes, what I've talked about is if they were to move, that we would have to do a redesign of Jordan's room. That was one of the hypotheticals, and obviously trying to communicate and make sure that people aren't hearing things secondhand. We did talk about that if they did move, it would have to be with the understanding that significant improvements would have to be made to that room.
Sure, to the way they would want it.
I mean, within reason, but I mean,
Well,
What,
certainly, we would want their input if we were designing.
exactly my point.
But that doesn't mean that they want to move to a new space so they can design. That's a totally different question.
Yeah, but it's never been asked. That's my point.
Yeah, if they could have a purpose-built room
Yeah,
and have the ideal, just like we're doing health occupations,
yeah.
they're purpose-built. Roger, I'm sure of this. You need to give them a chance to find out, and don't rely on Gavin Johnson's
Well,
judgment.
We're not making a decision.
I know,
tonight,
but
so-
let's get some input from the teachers and see if they could have a purpose-built room. Hang it, give me a second here. This is a big thing. This is really part of the mission statement of where we're all trying to go here, I think. I understand the concerns about not having what we want to have for the special needs kids. I'm all about this. Trust me, I was there, okay? Fought the battle for them and will continue to fight. But give the teachers, Bill brought it up, perfect point though, and I didn't think about that because it wasn't rolled out that way to them. If they had an opportunity, just like we did in health occupations, to design a purpose-built room for their students, would they find a better fit? And then we could decide if that's a better thing. We don't even know that answer. We have no knowledge of it yet.
Right.
We should approach it that way. If they get to work with the architect and build their own STEAM center for those students, would that be better for them? I think that's fair. I do. And if they come back and they believe that's the case, then the board could consider their viewpoints. And we've just come up
Why
with a
wouldn't we?
factor that we would, I'd say we would, because that's what we're doing right now. Because we believe that the teachers believe where they're at is the best.
Well, and so along that same line, I would also add, if that's the question that's going to be posed, I don't know if it has, is if there was going to be a redesign, if there could be a redesign of the existing tips room to make it better for their purpose, and given the fact that they have clearly expressed that they want to stay there, if you want to do a total apples to
True.
apples comparison, because obviously there are advantages
point.
of the existing tips room that could be modified that would better serve their needs potentially than.
And I'm good with that.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Is the dollars that are going to be used to do all this stuff, is this coming out of contingency from the bond?
It would have to.
I don't know how much is left in contingency.
Well, that's kind of where I was going. I know we're going to talk about that on June 6th and everything, and just wonder, because those are drying up pretty
Well, that's a
fast.
viable question. How much is left?
So, do you know offhand or no? Okay. We'll
I
talk
mean,
about that
2
in a
million,
second.
10
Good
million,
question.
But I'm just saying,
2 million,
the
10
idea is
million.
that whatever's in contingency, that's where.
Oh, let's
these
spend it out of the
additional-
general fund.
Yeah, we have money.
We got money.
And that's why I'm asking. As we're talking about doing this, is this coming out of contingency or is this coming out of general?
Well, I mean, that'd be part of the conversation. I mean,
The best part is the structures are built, everybody. The walls are up. They're not, this is not major. It's major, but it's not. It's renovation versus new construction, which is way more feasible to do. And so I think we built against, it's a great idea. So if I could have the rest of the board support that idea to go to the instructors and talk to them about the idea of a dream sheet and say, if you had a dream sheet, would that be better for you? And like Roger said, would it be better if you had a dream sheet back where you're at? And in fairness, if you had a dream sheet for both locations, what's your better dream sheet? And then we look at the cost associated with each dream sheet and then consider it. Because, at the end of the day, if the robotics team winds up in the health ops room, it gives them a permanent place. It's certainly an improvement. And then they can grow from there. And if that engineering wing continues to expand, we'll add another building on that whole piece of property in the front. Who knows what'll happen? Who knows what'll happen? You got to dream, because it's got to happen. We need more people that can do what we're talking about doing. So, okay, thank you, Roger.
All right, so I guess there was some further discussion, follow-up questions. Fair enough. Okay. All right, that moves us now into item C in the work session, which is the transparency discussion. So, Dr. Allah, do you want to lead that, or?
Sure, I could throw it out there. It's a board discussion.
Right.
Mr. Shelton's here tonight, shared request to have an added agenda item on here dealing with transparency. And I'm going to just summarize them for the board. So the board's already received this. One is a request to record all meetings that are where we have a quorum of the board. Am I correct on that? That's number one. So obviously this meeting's being recorded and it's being live streamed. But the board has not done regular board meetings. You've recorded and you've live streamed, but you've not done the work sessions or like the bond committee meetings where it's, a quorum of the board. So that's a question for the board. Is that something that you desire to do in the future? Obviously, we're upgrading technology. Mr. Castillo was talking about that probably by the end of June, we'll have some improvements. One of the challenges now is that we're not able to use our presentation function because of the transitions during COVID to try to make everything work, to bring in people from the outside. That'll be fixed where we'll be able to present and live stream at the same time. So going into next year, that'll be there.
Something, so, in terms of the quality of our recordings right now, are not very good. I know that it's all, it's based on what we get from the cameras, wherever they're at. When we had Wilson record, I mean, if you go back and look at those are much higher quality, much better audio. Are we I mean, what are we getting in June? Are we gonna have better audio quality? Are we gonna get, can we get individuals and we're gonna get better people that are called to the
So, I mean,
public?
There really wasn't any kind of video quality was gonna be added to it, if you're looking for that, audio quality would be better. You can actually have it done, you can get together, and get what the actual audio is needed.
Because I think that would be an important part of the transparency is that when we're recording, that we can hear everybody can hear what's being said. So I want to make sure that's happening.
So some meetings are recorded, some meetings aren't recorded. Who makes the choice of whether what gets recorded and who doesn't get it recorded?
Board of Education, that's the question in front of you tonight.
I don't, yeah, but prior to this,
There has been discussion. that
I don't
we've
remember
all
any.
had. I know we've at least there's been discussion here. I don't know that there was a consensus around it, but there was we had a conversation about recording our primary meetings. When we came out of COVID, there was a conversation, do we continue to live stream or do we go back to how it was before? And the desire of the board was for us to record.
what's the difference between the workshop and a meeting? I mean, we still vote on stuff during the workshop.
All the workshops have been recorded.
Have they?
Where when we have a meeting.
I'm not so sure about that,
The
Roger.
not live streaming, right? The live streaming is, so you have to separate live streaming versus recording, or both, right? There's like three different
Okay.
options.
So why isn't one good for all of them then?
That's the question
That's
for
what
you
we're
all
here
tonight.
Yeah, but who's made the decision up to this point? Nobody?
Well, there's been the regular board meetings that we have 4 action items that have been live streamed. They've been, and I don't know if they've been recorded as part of the live stream or if they've been separately recorded.
Okay, but they've been live streamed.
Yes, right.
Okay,
So
so,
then the meetings where we had workshops. we
Like
had
tonight?
never- tonight is being
Live stream right
live
now.
streamed right now, yeah.
Maybe we should have something on the wall that says that.
so have they always been live streamed?
Something a little
Our
different.
workshops?
So what we have typically done right now, as of now, is we've done our regular meetings, or if we have action items. So like we had action items tonight, so we wanted to make sure we recorded those. When it's been general discussion where we had presentation, we had not done that, but what we did is we recorded it using Zoom so that we were able to keep a record
Okay.
of the meetings. Really the question, this is a question for the board. I know it was presented by Mr. Shelton, so thank you for bringing it forward. But we're looking for direction from the board. Do you want to record? The new bond committee structure where it's all 7 board members is new. So you have a question on 2 things. Do you also wish to live stream and record work sessions and then the bond committee meetings? That's the question.
Well, I guess,
You all.
but I'm still asking the question, which I haven't got an answer to yet, is, so the workshops, because we have no action items, they haven't been live streamed? Is that correct? Is that a fair statement?
Well, not just because of that, just we had made a decision.
But who's we? I don't remember making that decision.
So we had a conversation. I don't know exactly who made it, but if you're mad at somebody, go ahead, you can blame me for it. I'm fine with that.
I'm asking who, why would we do one and not the other?
I
But-
don't think we have ever recorded workshops, ever, since I've been on the board. We never recorded workshops.
But we've recorded other ones.
We recorded them, you just didn't know it lately.
Well, what happened was, so when COVID hit and the state was mandating certain, obviously either Zoom or the virtual platform, there was no choice. We
Right.
obviously migrated to having virtual meetings. They were recorded. They were
Right.
then obviously saved onto the,
Right.
the website. As the state requirements started peeling away and we started having in-person, then we eliminated, because it wasn't state mandated.
It wasn't a board vote, was it?
No, with the district, because we didn't have an affirmative vote to have a full virtual interaction. So when the state law was eliminated, we defaulted back to what was before, and that was our board meetings in person. And because previously Wilson Aikens was the one who was recording and posting them, we just, the district continued to record them and post them online. Okay?
Wilson's a middle schooler. Now in high school.
High school now. Yeah.
Should be
When-
graduated pretty soon.
So and historically, pre-COVID, post-COVID, when we had workshops, we didn't video or record any of them. I mean, that existed when I got on the board originally in 2016.
I think there was a transition. There was no recording pre-COVID. Then you had online meetings, so they were recorded because of the Zooms. Then you transitioned back to in-person, which you could only have so many people in a room, so it was a hybrid. So that's how you've ended up.
Right, it's just an evolution of legal requirements and carryover from historical. And then, because of still the limitations that were imposed by the state regarding the number of people that could be in a room, Wilson couldn't come back in video. So the decision, we had this discussion where it's better if we're going to continue the recording, to have the recording be done by our own administrative employee, as opposed to having a third person come in and video and posting it to YouTube. That was the discussion back then. But that's why we're here tonight. I mean, we're having that further discussion and.
You brought up by a parent, though. So in the process, though, we're picking and choosing. And now with these workshops, where if we had our 3-person committees, the public would have been invited for open discussion and open dialogue.
No.
They're supposed to be.
No, they're not.
Oh, yes, they are.
If there's no quorum, it's not a publicly noticed meeting.
It says in our
Okay.
bylaws there should
No,
be
it
there.
doesn't.
I think you better read it.
I've read it, trust me.
What's
Wow.
it
So
say?
we don't have any 3-person committees. We've gone to committee as a whole, so
Right.
they'll all be
Well,
posted. They
well,
all
that's
are
fine.
posted
So they're
by law.
posted,
So let's
but the
just go with
public
what we
can't
have right
speak.
now.
The public can't freely speak on the topics or issues. They can only speak at call of the public. So because that silences the public. So the committee is really not a committee anymore. It's a board operating as a quorum without public input.
No, there's no quorum. There has to be 4 members of the board.
No, let's go back to
quorum.
let's go back to our committee of the whole operating as 6 to 7.
There's always going to be called.
Right,
But
Anytime
that's
that you-
not public participation in a sense of a committee. A committee, which I've been on, would have public can come in and talk at a committee. I made a couple notes, and it comes to other school districts and what they do. Mason Public Schools specifically has their committees all listed with the dates and times they're going to meet. They have their meeting minutes posted. They have everything set up so people can be involved in the bond committee or the finance committee or the curriculum committee or the health committee. And the finance is very important, right? We have $100 million budget and nobody is on a finance committee specifically and no public input. Now, when I came to Brighton area schools as the person that looked at running for office, I was sitting in on the finance committee meetings, sitting in them all the time. So I saw how upside down the district was, and I was the one that went to the state, as you know, and negotiated the deal with superintendent. So we have gotten away from all that. We don't have the public involved in any of our decision-making process. Technically, 3 minutes call the public is not involved. We've screened ourselves from that, and I personally don't support that. And if we look at Masons as a guide, and you just go online and look it up, it talks about specifically each committee. Every committee has an agenda. It's published. The community is knowledgeable of when the meetings are going to take place. And if they wanted to come to, like in our case, the bond committee meeting, they would have known. We didn't publish them. Maybe we should have. So I'm not saying it's by law. I'm talking about open and transparent, especially when it comes to curriculum and all those important things, finance. So what this resident has asked, or a citizen / parent has asked, to put all these meetings on tape so that the community can find out, if they wanted to, what we're doing. In a form of transparency, we should do that, unquestionably, because we have nothing to hide. I didn't know tonight's meeting was recording. Whatever. Might have said something a little different, but it's
It's supposed to be live streamed, I guess.
It's live stream right
It's
now.
being live streamed, right?
And that's
why
great.
We're critical. I mean, we're trying to be transparent by having a live stream.
I'm glad of that. But
Yeah.
when it comes down to public participation in this meeting, there isn't any. So, and this is a meeting where we're discussing very important topics, be it the lab for the TIPS program, be it these other things. There's no public input on these topics if they had some. And we work for them. We do. This board works for the public. And I think that we've eliminated all of them. You know, and not having a finance committee very much concerns me. Curriculum committee the same way.
Does the board have a direction regarding workshops? And then the only other, it's the committee of the whole, which would be the bond. Do you wish to change the direction? So we're already doing the live stream recording for regular meetings where we have action. Do you want to do that for the discussion meetings for work sessions and or committee meetings, which is all committee of the whole right now? What does the board wish to do with that?
Why wouldn't we just live stream all of our meetings?
That's what I'm asking.
That's what we're
Those are
asking.
the only two that we're not. So the question I'm asking is I'm looking for board direction. We flip the switch.
Flip the switch. I don't see why we wouldn't have.
There's a whole board.
Are you saying live streaming and recording?
When it live
I don't
streams,
care.
It automatically records.
Okay.
It automatically records and then we just.
No
just
different
put it
than
on
what's being
YouTube.
done now, right?
Correct.
Just somebody's got to turn it on, I guess.
Fine with me. But again, it shouldn't have, we should have probably done that ourselves instead of having a citizen tell us. But
So is that the direction from the board?
it's for me. I'm good with it. I'm fine with it.
That's fine.
Okay, great. So that was the first one. The second one is if we call a special meeting, and I'm going to try to paraphrase, if we call a special meeting within 2 days, that I would send out a note to families just saying, want to let you know that we had an emergency meeting, something along those lines. I think it's fair enough. We post within 18 hours, but
It has to be 18 hours by open.
it has to be 18 hours, but if it's on the short notice, I think if I'm correct, the request is to send out a note just because somebody might miss it, that it was posted on the website, is to send something out if something emergency so that people would notice. And so that was the request. That's the second one. Any thoughts or concerns?
I mean, we're required to do, it's just a question of whether you send it out to everyone by email, which I don't see why there'd be any objection.
People that have, people who have already opted into your email communication, right? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think probably the idea would be like, I send those notes out, it goes out to 8,000 people.
Right.
I could send just
Good idea.
heads up that we had to add this meeting and here's on this topic. That's kind of what you're thinking, right? Just a simple thing. Take a look at the website and then it's just a
If
prompt.
you have an interest, come in.
And then the third one, I don't know that it's as relevant here, but because our meetings are usually in the evening, but it's that we would have these meetings 4:00 or after always.
Can't guarantee that though. You might have to have an emergency meeting at 7:30.
There are times like something we haven't even thought about, something might happen, or it'd be in the morning, but I think that's been the direction from the board always.
That's the same we should try for 6 o'clock.
Yeah, later and
Yeah,
the
I
board
think-
is advocating for that.
We've
so.
never had one before 6, other than the 4:30 one that one day. It was the only one that was before 6 o'clock. So-
I remember the bond meetings used to be at 4:30 only because of the schedule of people
No, but
that,
those weren't public meetings. We're talking about where you have to call a special meeting of the board or a regular,
Okay.
a special meeting is the one that requires 18 hours notice. That's what he was referring to. Yeah.
But I think that is practice here, and I'll be honest with you, from the board, that's been keep it as late as possible. I've heard it from all the different people, make sure that people can get there. So I think the board would probably be very much in favor of that. So am I missing any from that, Mr. Shelton? Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you bringing that forward.
All right, so that brings us to the next item, which was the board reports that was added. Mr. Connolly, you want to start?
Yeah, well, somebody might be shorter than mine, so anybody they won't have any board reports before I start? I got a couple. Anybody?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So on the 19th of May, I met with the National Guard up in Howell and asked them if they could participate in some kind of summer programs at all with us. The commander there basically has rolled out that he would put together a class of up to 30 students in June and up to 30 in July. So 2 classes, 3 days each. For students that might want to get acquainted with the armed services or just come in and have 3 days of hanging out with their friends.
High school students, middle school students?
Grades 9 through 12 and primarily older, but I asked about 8th graders that were moving up in the 9th grade. He said that they were open to pretty much the students. And I said, because I'd like to, obviously exposure is good, like we talked, in my opinion anyway, earlier, and people get ideas and they work towards those goals. And so that was an opportunity that we may have. He's supposed to schedule and send me a schedule next week that I could then bring to the superintendent to say these are the dates that he can do it. And he would staff it and he would organize the opportunity, and we would supply the facility at Brighton High School. It'd be a plan. So that's in the works, not signed or anything else. And I told him I'm just one board person. I can only talk about things and then bring them back to the superintendent and the board for discussion. I thought that was kind of exciting. I was impressed that
They can get information. I'd love to push it out.
I know. And the thing is I was really shocked because I met the recruiter, we came up with the idea. Bill and I met originally the Air Force recruiter, and then I was at the school for another thing, and the Army recruiter was there. It was Sergeant Sabrina, I'll think of the last name, but nice lady that was handling it. And I talked to her for a minute, and she said they're pretty tight guidelines on how they offer things and what they can do, because they work, in a structured environment. But I met with him, like I said, on 19th, and he said that he could do 3 days and offer us and do it twice for us, once in June and once in July. So that's that. But we'll see when the schedule comes. He said he'd have it to us this week, what his days he could do it, and then we'll see what happens. Students. This First Amendment situation where we had a teacher and then a principal request one of our students remove clothing. Now, the responses I've got, because it was the clothing said, "Let's go, Brandon." Now, this has happened a couple times in the schools between the middle school and high school in different times, and it's other things as well. Now, it's technically, actually it is, it's against the law to do that. The policy of the school was that they found it offensive that "Let's Go Brandon," what it stands for. They find it offensive because there's some, people out there that made it something bad. Now, Brandon himself is a professional race car driver. He won a race. This young man had nothing to do with what that other words meant that other people put into it. So under the First Amendment, the student's protected and those can't be removed. Now, our school has decided to not obey the law, and because they feel that it's a vulgar thing, that they should have them remove the clothing. Now, this has happened throughout the different schools. Well, the only thing to fix that problem so that we abide by the law is to have a dress code. And it's clearly stated in different cases and legalities and the Tinker suit and all the different ones from years ago. But if you have a dress code, then it's not a problem. But by arbitrarily deciding what's offensive and what's not offensive is a problem. We're not above the law. We're not above the First Amendment, and the constitutional rights of the students are being violated when that happens. So we have to make a decision as a board how we're going to address this. I'd like to bring that for an action item or future action item to make a decision what we're going to do. It needs to be addressed. It can't be an arbitrary decision. It can't be because we feel like this. What's the law? And the law is clear, I believe, as a technician reading the law, and a dad, and a community person who's a servant of this community. And obviously, we don't want people to do things that make other people feel uncomfortable. But because of the way that particular issue is, it doesn't make anybody feel uncomfortable unless they look into it further. Now, the way I read the statutes was if they have something on their wear or whatever that would make somebody feel frightened or afraid, that's different than what we're talking about. Because it's not just about this particular issue. So, but this one we can use. So I'd like to go further on that to make sure that we abide by the laws of our state and we don't break them. I think that's fair. And whatever they are, we can't make a policy that breaks the law here. It's against the law for us to make a policy that breaks the law, which is an amazing twist, isn't it? But we didn't make the policy. Administration made the policy. The board didn't vote to break the law. Administration felt uncomfortable, so they broke the law. And we can't support that. So whatever it is, we have to come up with a plan.
So we know, when you're asking for it to be, what specifically are you asking?
For
future action.
Thank you.
Are you going to draft a policy?
Well, here's what thank you, Roger, for that. I appreciate it. So what I want to do is look at the specific case of the Let's Go Brandon shirt being forced to be removed from a student. This was not optional. This student was removed from class during class, sent to the office, and forced to remove his clothing. I want to know where we stand.
Opinion on that?
I do. I have a legal opinion. I think I shared with the board, but I can share that again.
Yeah, and the opinion said that we can't do it. It flat out said it. So
It says that it's gray, but
it said, don't do it because you open yourself up for a lawsuit. So I believe this is no different than any other standard that we're going to set similar to our strategic plan. We want to put that in place. I love the stuff. I do. I just want to see it get enacted and see it become fruitful for the children and the youth. And I saw Bill all about it. Let's sign it in. Let's go. If this is what we're going to do. And he's not totally wrong by saying that, because he says, let's give him the room and let's let our professional educators do it and be free to do it. The question is, where do we set the guidelines and what people can do or not do within our buildings? So I'd like to have that on for future, for discussion, to say where Brighton Area Schools is going to go with that particular topic when it's but again, not just that issue, but when the whole topic of what we're allowed to do on that. And I believe, like I said, honestly, I don't think a dress code is unreasonable. I mean, I've seen it work very well. In our school, it might not, but I've seen it work in other schools that we've been involved with. And dress codes it creates a real level playing field. And it can be helpful for a lot of people to have a dress code.
how are you talking about? Uniforms?
I'm talking about a dress code. Golf shirts.
Dress code.
We have a dress code.
Well, maybe we have to follow it for all.
You're saying revising.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the best environment for students. And I got the reason that people don't like it, because we as adults know what really that means. But the student, let's say another student in the middle school would have to text that in. What's Let's Go Brandon stand for? Well, it could be about the Brandon, the race car driver. It could it's a bad topic. That's the issue. You have to search it out. And under the protection for the students, because they have to search it out, the students are protected. They can wear it. Okay? And we need to protect them. I'm not encouraging students to wear vulgar profanity, things that would be offensive, not at all. But I am protecting their rights, because their rights are their rights and they're entitled to them. And they've been fought and died for. So we need to do that because it's that serious of an issue. Now, we can make suggestions and we can request, but we can't take their clothes off. There's a difference. He was sent back with a t-shirt on. Okay.
So are you suggesting that the protocol is if there's a determination by the administrator that something is worn, and a lot of times it comes up with too
Good.
Revealing,
Understood.
right?
Yes, sir.
And so
Yeah.
are you suggesting that if the process for how to address the issue, if the administrator determines that there is a violation needs to be revised, or are you saying that there needs to be a revision as to the discretion or lack thereof that's granted to an administrator to make that determination
Or
in the first place?
or our
I'm just
staff.
trying to understand what is it that you're trying to
Well,
address?
first of all, our staff does not determine constitutional law. The First Amendment stands.
And neither do any of us board members decide constitutional.
That's a fact. Oh, yes, we do. You know, we,
It's a judge.
you know what we decide though? We decide to enforce it under statute, under our board oath of office. So anyone who doesn't enforce our Constitution and our laws is in violation of their board office and oath of office. Okay, well, then right now we're all in violation of our office. Well, we are, because that happened.
Beg to differ.
I don't. We're the ultimate responsible party, according to statute, what goes on in the school district. And as soon as we get back to that, the sooner we'll fix these problems. We are the responsible party, not our people who work here. We are. So in that, we're protecting our youth and our society. And it doesn't always tip in the scale. We have people that work in the justice system, you included.
Yep.
That darn scale goes 51% sometimes, 49 another time, and maybe should have won, didn't win, whatever. This is clear. That students' rights were violated unconditionally. Now, what are we going to do about it as a board? According to what I read today from what board members are supposed to do, we're the ones that oversee it. So I'm going to refer it back to you, how to take care of it, to follow the law. I wouldn't know about the other stuff. And I understand I was there, I went to Scranton, my kids went to Scranton. I'm probably the only one that has 3 generations in the school system. My mom graduated in 55. I can tell you all kinds of stories. So the point would be though, I'm there for the benefit of the student. So the students benefit, and our people who work in our school system are there to provide the best education possible for every student. And that, I believe, is their oath. And I do also believe that a very large percentage of them, that's all they do, is try to do that. So how can we follow our laws and also help them to do that? There's no violating the law when you feel like it, Roger.
Nobody suggested that.
Yes, they have. And here's why. That was a total suggestion. And here's how it was sent to me. It's, we feel like that's a bad thing. That's a quote. Firsthand. And I said, but what statute and what law allows you to do that? There was no board discussion on it. It was they feel like doing that. There's no such thing. I feel like driving 100 miles an hour, and guess what? I got a ticket for it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this case, nobody's gotten a ticket yet, but we don't want one either.
Can I say something? If we're going to revisit this, I think it's important for us to revisit it in the context of the entire dress code. I don't think we should pick and choose and say one aspect of the dress code should be,
Right, well, that's
Revisit
that was my
That was
question.
Roger. I would support that, of course.
that it would be the entire dress code would be
Right, well, that was my
revisited.
point.
Yeah,
Is
so
it- is it-
it's not just a one narrow.
Right. I would support that. But the thing is, as this came up, and we look at such a tough time already. Okay, now let's just say that we got the wrong personality, and this happened to the wrong personality, and we actually caused harm to youth. Okay? We would not do that intentionally. No one would. And nor would the people even thinking that they were, don't wear that shirt would do that. They weren't going to try to intentionally do harm to a child. It's not going to happen. But we don't know what indirectly happens. What about when they stand the kid up in front of the class and then they say, you're leaving our class, you've been discharged. You're going to the office with no background of ever being sent to the office for anything, not even once. What's that going to do? How about burning an image in a kid's head? That shouldn't have happened because the law was broken when they did it. So that's
So
with that.
can I just say one thing?
Sure.
You know, I think the pushback on this is that we clearly, within the law, we would have the ability to have to address a student that has profanity on their dress code,
Correct.
right? So let's go, Brandon. And this is where the debate comes from. It's a euphemism that includes a profane word. Whatever the phrase is, the word that's in there with the starts with the letter F, that is the reason that's why I was asked to be turned inside out, right? It's because of that. So our teachers and our administrators, we're not constitutional law experts. So we're leaning on, you know, our lawyers to take a look at some of these things. Obviously, it's challenging. It's outside of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, from the administrative side, you know, I'm 26 years in my career, and every time we address profanity, and if that's a profane So that's the big debate is a euphemism. Is that profanity or not? So we've asked for legal review on it. And so that's where we're at. I just wanted to clarify from the administrative side, of why the administration asked for that to be addressed.
So a unicorn can be offensive to people. So does that mean if someone has a unicorn on their shirt then that they need to take it off?
So it's honestly, the phrase itself, there's speech. It's the specific profane word that's in the euphemism.
Same way
really
with a
the debate.
unicorn. Yeah, same thing. Same thing.
There's a profane word. Yeah.
No different than,
So I'm just telling you that's why it was addressed, because there's a profane word in there.
You said some people might find a unicorn offensive.
no, what it means.
Well, right, but the point is that the issue is not whether the phrase "Let's go Brandon" is offensive. It's whether it's
What it means.
Our code, and most, I venture to guess, every school code prohibits vulgarity, right?
Correct.
So the legal question is that a sufficient enough euphemism to constitute vulgarity? It has nothing to do with offensiveness. That's what I'm saying. That's the legal issue.
But a unicorn can also mean something different as well that's offensive. That could be a euphemism as well. And that's my point. You're right. Let's go Brandon isn't offensive. But maybe what the spirit of what somebody's wearing it in, just like the spirit of somebody wearing a shirt with a unicorn on it.
Well, that's it. I mean, you can come up with, if you sat here, we come up with perhaps maybe 10 or 15 different
There you go.
fact-specific examples.
Right.
We can't have a policy that says, and vulgarity is defined to include but not limited to, let's go Brandon, unicorns. I mean, that's just not a realistic policy. And so the point is, and that's why I asked Mr. Conley, what does he look, does he want to change the policy of how you define what the process is for an alleged violation?
I'll answer that. I can answer
So
that.
that's what I'm saying.
I want to follow the law. I want to follow the First Amendment rights of the students of our school district. And, there's shirts in the school that talk about, I'm just going to say what it is. So in the high school, students are allowed to wear abortion as health care. I find that extremely offensive to the degree that is an nth degree, because I don't believe in abortion, period. So they're allowed to wear those in high school. They're not forced to remove them and turn them inside out. And by the way, this student wasn't allowed to turn inside out. It was removed and taken off his body and sent back to class with a t-shirt on. There's a difference. So when did our staff and our management of our staff become the constitutionalists when it comes to these allegedly offensive things? It's a problem. It's a problem because they were given the authority to do it, and it wasn't from us. This board never voted on it. This group, this management group, went ahead and did it by their own decision, no different than the quarantining of the students, no different than a lot of the potting issues, no different than anything. They did it on their own, Roger, not by my decision or ours. But yet under statute, it claims we're responsible at the end of the day for these decisions that are made. I'm not comfortable with those decisions being made on my behalf without me having full knowledge about them. So I want it presented, I would like it presented to the board.
So this is my point.
I got it.
Perfect. So for example, is your proposal that we adopt a policy that every time a student comes in with an arguable euphemistic vulgarity, that before they can address that student to take off the shirt or allow them to use the shirt, that we have to summon a board meeting to make a decision? Okay, well, that's my point.
No,
If
absolutely
you're
not.
going to change the policy, what is it that you're suggesting? I mean, are you suggesting that there be a different procedure?
I brought you the problem. I did. I brought the problem. I'm not an expert on coming up with a solution on this. My position is I was elected by a group of people to bring forth these things. And I personally have knowledge of this because when I was there, I understand it. So if we allow it to continue without having people follow the law, we are violating the law. I don't want to violate the law, Roger. So I'm asking you as the board president, more than me, to determine what the course of action should be that we violated the law and how are we going to fix it so it doesn't happen again.
But you're presupposing that we all, and our lawyer and everyone else agrees that the law was broken. And that's
Oh,
not
there's,
an
it's,
accurate premise.
okay, well, I'll make the assumption that it was only here from this. And I appreciate that. You're being fair on that. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a constitutional law attorney. I've read the case studies and we discussed it. And Dr. Outlaw and I've had discussions on this specifically about the case studies that I read. And most everybody, I guess, in the law people have read these case studies. I didn't know that. Pretty common, right? So making a judgment from what I've learned, we've broken the law when it comes to this situation. Now, we are not above the law. If you want the law to be changed, you have to go and have it changed. So when is it, in this will set a precedent in a good way. And I'm not saying have a free-for-all and we should have, like, again, if we allow the abortion shirts, our birth control in the high school, now you tell me that Let's Go Brandon is more offensive? It's not. Abortion is birth control. That means it's okay to have an abortion to kill a child. Now that's an extreme. That could put somebody that was could read that and say, my goodness, this is awful. This is terrible. My life, I can't deal with that you're wearing that shirt because I feel threatened that you'd feel that way. Because that's different. It's an outward expression. That Tinker lawsuit said Vietnam. It was about a Vietnam War bracelet that a young lady wore to school. And I read it and I go, my goodness, what a courageous young person. She didn't support the war and she was sent home. Supreme Court decided that she had a right to wear a bracelet and not support the war, which everybody that I've spoke to on that issue, on this particular topic that we're talking about tonight, our veterans and everybody else, said that's what we fought for. That's the right that young person had if she didn't believe in the Vietnam War, but she shouldn't be discharged from her school and not be able to go to her class because of it. So that's the lawsuit decision that, she can wear it. So in this case, we have the same situation. And Brighton Area Schools is not above the law. And that's what I'd like for you to decide how to address it because you guys know much more about that than I do. And that this administration should follow the laws, period.
I don't think you would have any objection to anybody agreeing that.
Then that will
the
stop today.
administration
Then it
and
stops today.
the
That
board-
no student, I know, go ahead. It has to stop though.
We follow the law, but.
We didn't.
But what action has to be taken in any given circumstance?
I don't know.
to Follow the law
I
is
wouldn't know.
different. I mean, it's different for every circumstance.
I wouldn't know, Roger. All I know is
That's
we
all I'm
have,
saying.
I agree with
So
you.
all we can do is adopt policies as to how we're going to regulate that. We can't sit in every single classroom
I agree.
as board members and micromanage and make those decisions.
And we shouldn't. And that's why
That's
you
what I'm
have,
saying.
that's why you have professional staff to do that. I believe professional staff have got to follow the laws and they can't decide arbitrarily that they feel it's okay to do this. And so that's what I'd ask that you bring forward is that you come up with a plan to have it on like for a future action item that we can have a discussion what the laws are. And then until that happens, this stops entirely in the school district. Okay, until we've decided we cannot take a chance on violating the constitutional rights of our students because we feel like it. That's it. We can't. And if we don't say that, then we're part of the violation. So I've made my statement. Don't do it until you find out what the law is. You protect the rights of your students, who, by the way, are minors, which deserve to be protected even more. Okay, on that topic. So thank you.
Sure.
So can we get it on for future action?
I think maybe for future action where you can talk about it, because I
Okay.
think you still don't have something to vote on. 'Cause I think-
That's fine. I don't want to vote on it. I don't think we can vote on it.
No, there's-
If that's-
I don't think we can, but it needs to be discussed on how the school will handle it and the board knows. I think that's fair.
that if that's going to be the case, then there would have to be a revisiting of the policy. I mean, I think that's really.
Yeah, I think Dr. Krebs is correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way we can effectively address.
That's
the
fine,
issue.
but because we can't have a policy that violates the law.
So
So,
our policy doesn't violate the law currently.
Oh, you did when they took the kid out of school.
Again,
so you are,
No, it's true,
At
Roger.
the
You
next,
can't deny it, it did.
at the next meeting, I believe that you're going to be looking at student handbooks, which would include.
There you go.
Dress codes, so maybe it works out.
Yeah.
It could all be done under the same heading that's already on
I think
there.
that's great, and I appreciate the action on it, too.
Yeah, and just, I appreciate the question on it, but one of the things that is like, is really helpful is when there's case law on so like Tinker is very clear. So from the administrative side, we know what the rules are. And then we get in these gray areas, and that's when the lawyers try to figure out, and then they argue it, and then a judge will say, it's a euphemism. You can do this, you can't do this. Case law would be really helpful here.
Or it could go the other way, and the case law could go against us.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
If they file it.
I'm just saying, whatever case law says, that's what we end up following.
We don't
So
want it, though.
that's
We don't-
one of the challenges is there's always these new things. And then that's what the
I don't
Supreme
wanna lose
Court
the
is
law- I
always,
don't want to lose the lawsuit.
right. So, okay.
All right, I have one other item. Okay. Well, I have two. Okay, so and I'm going to take a record of this too. I guess it's recorded, doesn't matter. So MCL 380.1852 is the MCL that requires flags in every classroom, US flags specifically. And it also requires the Pledge of Allegiance be done every day in a classroom unobstructed. It appears that we have obstructed Pledge of Allegiances in our school system where the students aren't getting the Pledge of Allegiance, where it's either turned off in the classroom or parts of it are not being heard or the time isn't being made. But under the statute, the law reads clearly that it's a misdemeanor to do so. So I'd like to have our, we'll call it management, be aware of what the law is and that it's a misdemeanor. So if in fact a particular employee decides they don't want to do the Pledge of Allegiance, which happened to me personally one year in the gym class at Scranton Middle School more than once. I was coaching Science Olympiad in the morning and I'd be over there and that particular instructor turned off the Pledge of Allegiance and I'd be in the office and the pledge was on. I brought it to the superintendent's attention and it obviously was handled immediately. But it had been going on for quite a while. My students, remember, Star? Okay. Our students were sitting in the gym with their legs crossed about 30 of them at a time or 40 with no sound in the gym and while the pledge is being done in the rest of the school because that teacher didn't like the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, the law is clear. That's not to happen in our public schools. It's supposed to be in every classroom. So I've gotten reports back that it's fragmented in some cases.
If you could just relay those, then we can
Sure.
check in on them. I think it's being done. I mean, my
Pretty
kids
good.
are here and they do it every single day and
As,
they always give me the reports and
That's
things
good.
like that.
but that's a
It's-
good thing. And
It's happening, but if there's spots where there could be technology issues or things, we have to get it fixed.
or decisions
So
of a,
Just relay it to us and we can check into it.
I'm back to my position. I'm a board member. I really have no, and as you're aware, you may be aware,
There's an example, one that's very clear. That's very clear. So
so on that, if we can just make sure everybody knows what the rules are, I think that's all I'm asking. And I think that's good enough. I'm not looking to have any other issue. And the one other issue on the flags though. The law is specific about the American flag. Now, we haven't determined or made decisions as a board yet about other flags. Okay, there are other flags flying in the classrooms. These flags represent other countries. They represent agendas or topics, or they are personal representations from our instructors. Now, there are rules and regulations on that as well that don't go in favor of instructional or staff to do that. Now, it's up to administration to tell us what those rules and regulations are. But they're not allowed to wear a shirt like a student could wear because it's not allowed. They're not protected under the First Amendment. They're our employees. So in this, another for future action item, I'd like a discussion of what's allowed to be presented in classrooms other than the American flag. And what the statute is and what state law says about it. And I would propose to the board that the only flag that should fly in a classroom in the Brighton district or any school district is the American flag. Period. Now, there's a case where people want to fly their university flag. They want to fly the school flag that they went to.
Michigan flag.
State of Michigan, that's different.
White flag.
That's different, but that's different. Here's the deal. As we know, the American flag flies the highest in any situation. We have a situation that that's not always the case. My goal is that if you have to make a policy, how do you write a policy. Well, right now the policy is in every classroom in a public school, the American flag flies. That's the policy from the state level. Now, we've adopted a new policy that we can fly whatever flag we feel like. That's not the case. So we need to know what the rules are on what is presented in the classroom and is what is used for propaganda and advertising of what. Okay, now are we flying a U of M flag? Is that a problem? No, I don't think it's a problem if they went to U of M or went to Michigan State. But what's our process here to determine what's okay and what's not okay? I do find some flags that are flying in the classroom offensive, personally. And I know that my students, and students, not my students, but the students of this district also do. So in that, we should have something that addresses it, and going into next fall, it can be taken care of. I don't see any need to take urgent action today. It's been going on all year, and all last year and the year before that. But there's time to have a decision about it and time to take some pictures and say what flags are flying and what are people doing, and does it fit what Brighton Area Schools wants to do or not do. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I got one more thing. Recesses. What's going on with recesses? Kids have 8 minutes out every other day, or 10 minutes at the middle school level. Now, how can that be in health and wellness? Having a young person, 11, 12, 13 years old, not get to go outside, keeping them cooped up? Why are we only going out one every other day? Do we know? Does anybody know?
No, I'll be honest with you, recess is really, is typically like a K-6 thing primarily. So in a lot of places, there's not even recess at a,
How's that working
at a
out
middle
for us?
school level.
Yeah,
There's no recess at high school.
right.
So there's a spot where that kind of phases out a little bit, but if we want more time for middle school, I know before school, they meet outside, they do different things. I remember
Right.
here in this building, being a middle school student, after lunch, we went outside for 15 minutes and shot baskets and threw the football around
Right.
and came back in. It was great.
In terms of a formal recess, I'm not, we've never.
There's
had
no playgrounds or anything in middle school
Right.
campuses, and things like that.
Well, during COVID, here's the thing. This is why I'm bringing it up. We have extreme cases of situations here that I'm not even going to talk about with our students that are having some difficulties. I've sat with some parents, and I've got one that I sat with, one of our contractors actually has got his granddaughter who won't even leave her room now at 17 years old. So, I'm thinking of the vision more, maybe because we did it last year doesn't make it right, where the kids could be out running around and getting some fresh air and saying hi to friends. And, we've talked about this all year about what we're going to do about helping the students and what we're going to do this summer and having classes or whatever. What can we do to help these students to overcome this disaster? Well, it's just an opinion. And I was brought to me by a parent that they said it's every other day the kid gets outside. Well, young people don't belong locked in a building. So maybe we have to change that, and maybe we should send them out for 20 minutes or a half an hour and skin the kneecap and get a stitch or something if they do.
So we can add 20 minutes to every school
I
day?
can't tell you that right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we
Because
could.
with the 7 through 12, they have their class
Yeah,
schedule.
but we see how it's working out. We hired a lot of counselors, we hired a lot of psychologists, we hired a lot of this. We did not address the core problems, Roger. We're addressing how to fix it with adding more people in other departments, not saying maybe what we're doing is wrong. I'm not saying what we're doing wrong. I don't know. All I can say is,
That's what I'm asking.
yeah,
asking
I'm
what
looking,
you're asking. What are you looking
I'm
for?
looking for a solution to have a better health and wellness for the students in a tough time. So maybe because of this, we take 5 minutes off every class till the end of the year and add it into a time that the students can go run around and help them get ready to go for a summer. And hopefully they have a great summer. And, I don't know what to do, Roger. I'm just sharing with you that every other day the students got outside for 8 minutes. I can't see that in the middle school.
If I could do some,
Sure.
just have a conversation with Dr. Hiller and Mr.
Yep.
Borg on it, like, where does this 8 minutes come from? Is it
Right.
connected to their lunch period? It's at lunchtime? Okay, they do go outside. So, obviously,
You see what I'm thinking
I'm a
though?
believer
Change the
in going
model.
outside, but they're doing something. It's, when you go outside, it's an intramural.
Right.
You're instead of just standing around, because there's no playgrounds and things like that.
There's a football field. a really nice one.
But for 8 minutes, they're not gonna.
But I'm just saying,
They got, come on, Phil, they got to turn around.
I'm just saying you're gonna do something. And
So they get there at what time in the morning? 7 what?
so the official school day starts at 7:55, ends at 2:41. At
So
the
they get there a
middle
little
school.
earlier and they're hanging out in the gym and that.
Yeah.
I saw that. That's good. And then they get to have lunch with their friends and hang out. And that's, how long is lunch? 20 minutes?
Probably 30, 35,
Just
probably 30.
about 30, maybe 35.
So that's good. So they get to hang out with their friends, at lunch. But I'm just, when it was brought to my attention, they had 8 minutes outside. I would suggest, and again, be it in COVID, be it whatever emergency, we are under emergency, just so we all know. This is not over. It's not over. The kids are suffering. So my mom just went to the doctors today. She's 84. She's okay, I hope, but she has COVID. And, it's one of those things that it's not over. And, but for the kids, which is our charge, what can we do to help them? That's all I'm saying. It makes sense to me to look at something. If we can get them 15 minutes to run around on the football field and there's a bunch of kickballs out there, whatever it is. And if it helps them have a better summer and a better life, it seems like we should do it. All right. I think that's it for tonight. And thank you for me.
Anyone else? All right, well, that concludes our meeting for this evening. Our next regular meeting will be June 13 at 7 p.m. Our workshop, although our workshop is scheduled, Dr. Ellis, June 6th at
6th. Bond committee,
6:30 and
it's 5 to 6:30.
5 and 6:30.
5 to 6:30, and it's run by the construction. They'll all be here.
And I would suggest that perhaps we consider adding to the agenda for that evening the approval of the strategic plan. We'll need to confirm that Mr. Stahl. Yeah.
Okay.
That Mr. Stahl and Ms. Reed will be available.
Just a reminder, we got the invitation for the bridge graduation, is that the 9th?
Correct. June 9th, 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
at the BCPA. Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
all right, this meeting's adjourned.
Good night.
We'll just show me somewhere else. So I'm not messing it up.
You don't take those out.
See you, Bill.
See you, bye.
Okay, all right. Well, you were,
How are you, Mr. Crawford?
you know,
You want to bus somewhere for a long trip?
no,
Get a ring?
you know, 20 years